Ivan's small hand reached toward the sunlight streaming into the house. Just how long had I been waiting for this moment? At long last, his blue eyes gazed upward in a daze, feeling the warmth against his skin. An unfamiliar ceiling, an unfamiliar sensation. Ivan daydreamed with excitement about gorgeous female warriors, spirit possession, teleportation, transmigration into another world. No matter which one it was, I finally made it. Prior to this, back on Earth where Kim Sunwoo lived, a blinding flash of light had erupted. Kim Sunwoo, a citizen of the Republic of Korea, had been preparing for this very moment for a very long time. Inside his room, he skillfully operated his computer. Having read and played through every book, web novel, online forum, and video game he could find, Kim Sunwoo's fingers continuously hammered away at the mechanical keyboard, filling the small room with clattering sounds for every single piece of work he liked. He had quickly generated a massive wall of text in the comment section, leaving behind a staggering 5,700-word review. With utmost seriousness under the blue glow of his monitor, Kim Sunwoo tirelessly churned out rigorous, meticulous analyses day in and day out. Every character and plot point was dissected by him. The overarching plot, the world building, and then he seriously critiqued the story's external elements and character relationship diagrams. He had even memorized the exact locations of every hidden reward and ancient relic by heart, right down to critiquing the prose and stylistic design of the work. Naturally, the replies beneath Kim Sunwoo's reviews were anything but praise. Rather, they drove authors to drop their pens and triggered furious readers, racking up a total of 992 comments, even if it meant getting universally blasted and banned across online communities. Right at that moment, a pure sheet of white light pulled him away from Earth, transferring his consciousness into the blue pupils of Ivan. At long last, he had succeeded, transmigrating into an otherworldly body. He found himself inside a simple house built of wood and straw. Let's see here. Ivan sat up and groggily pinched his own cheek to figure out his identity. He looked to be around 4 or 5 years old. Should I check my stats? After a moment of thought, he reached his hand out and shouted a command from memory to double-check. Status window. After waiting a few seconds, Ivan saw absolutely nothing appear. Embarrassed, he pulled his hand back and put on a thoughtful look in confusion. Does this mean this isn't a typical regression story? Well, whatever. A second later, Ivan regained his full confidence and smirked, trusting in his own extraordinary memory. After all, among the stories he had reviewed, plenty lacked a status window, and time and ability were on his side to conquer this other world. Dressed in baggy clothes, his eyes brimming with resolve, he stepped outside the crude house. Should I start by crafting something to make a fortune first? Time flew by quickly after Ivan arrived. In the yard of Ivan's house, the voices of adults and children working together echoed as Kim Sunwoo realized this body of his was named Ivan Petrovich. He carefully carried a basket full of potatoes to his mother while his father worked the soil with a hoe. His parents were tenant farmers who didn't even know the name of their country, completely uneducated and illiterate. Not long after, Ivan tried to create bubbles using large stones, only to startle himself. Thinking it would be a revolutionary invention, he tried to make soap, only to fail miserably. In the end, he received a painful beating on his behind, not just for splashing around in the water, but because the thing called soap already existed in this world. A considerable amount of time passed after Ivan possessed the body of the young boy. Newspapers were scattered along the long road of the rustic town he walked through. While heading to the village to buy eggs for his mother, the newspapers caught his eye. Ivan was quite surprised as he read the newspaper in hand. If they can print newspapers and distribute them to such a remote countryside, this can't be medieval times, right? Just where on earth is this place? Holding a long dip pen, he crossed off line after line on a piece of paper. On that day, most candidate titles on his transmigration watch list were crossed out. The time spent since Ivan's arrival slowly grew longer day by day. He gathered more information about the world following his transmigration into this new land. And eventually, Kim Sunwoo learned the name of the kingdom he lived in and the name of its monarch. A tongue of fire instantly devoured the list Ivan had written from his remarkable memory as he tore up the few remaining pages of candidate novel titles and tossed them into the flames. A bustling, cheerful city only deepened his doubts. Now it was an unheard-of kingdom, an unheard-of monarch, and unheard-of neighboring nations. Ivan sat before the fire burning away the papers, the faint glow illuminating his grim face. Rather than worrying about which specific story he had transmigrated into, the biggest question was what genre he was actually in. Yet as time went on, The years continued to pile up since his transmigration. Three grotesque, terrifying monsters appeared in the world Ivan lived in. Suddenly, the demon lord descended. In the small village echoed a man's reassuring parting words. "Don't worry. Just wait for me with Ivan, all right." Two soldiers in uniform coldly escorted Ivan's anxious father away from home. Kim Sunwoo's, "No," Ivan's father said. "I will definitely come back." Only he and the orange-haired woman remained, watching the silhouettes of the three men depart after being conscripted by the recruiters to the battlefield. Ivan's serious blue eyes flared with annoyance and resentment. From this moment on, Kim Sunwoo's sense of self began to warp. A few more years passed as he lived in this new world after his successful transmigration. Ivan calmly helped his mother, who was engrossed in meticulous sewing and weaving. Kim Sunwoo, no, Ivan now assisted his mother quite adeptly with the household chores. Time flew by once more in this new world, the 8th year since his transmigration. Sitting properly at the desk, pen in hand and writing intently, Ivan took advantage of every spare moment to study, finally mastering the script of this otherworldly realm. Another 2 years in the new world slipped away. In the 10th year since transmigration, the sky over his village turned gloomy and gray, delivering a shocking and terrible piece of news to Ivan. A death notice for his father arrived, with neat lines of print stamped across the document delivered into Ivan's hands. The absurd part was that this official notice had been issued 2 years ago. The grim news filled his pale face with a mix of confusion and fury. "What is this? I don't understand anything anymore. Is the genre of this world grand strategy simulation?" Ivan frowned in stubborn frustration, overthinking to the point of losing his cool. "It's clearly fantasy, yet there's gunpowder weaponry and steam engines. If you call it slice of life, knights, mages, the demon lord, and non-human races are locked in total war. If that's the case." A faint noise snapped Ivan out of his thoughts, making him look up with lingering bewilderment on his face. He looked at the grief-stricken woman trembling all over as she covered her mouth to stifle her sobs. "Mother." Ivan watched her weep into her hands, his voice trembling with emotion. How could this happen? He did nothing else except soften his voice to comfort the heartbroken woman before him. "Don't worry, Mother." The next day, Ivan stood on the train platform, moving forward alongside the recruits with a bag slung over his shoulder. Having decided to enlist in the military, Ivan carefully handed his train ticket to the soldier standing at the engine. His enlistment stipend was 15 copper coins, all arranged to be sent under his mother's name. Afterward, he sat with the others on the long train ride, hunching over in deep contemplation, not out of mere filial piety, but out of compassion for the woman who was sacrificing her entire life for him. His brow furrowed with unmistakable resolve and grit, driven by the guilt of having hijacked the body of Ivan, the son who was that woman's sole reason to go on living. His time in this new body continued to tick onward. The 14th year since transmigration, the 4th year in the military. Ivan, with his distinct blue eyes, threw himself into battle through a sea of flames wielding various weapons, realizing that his body possessed far more combat aptitude than he had ever imagined. Treading over demon corpses fueled by sheer fury and madness, he racked up countless small military feats on the battlefield, rising from a conscript to a regular soldier. The surrounding scenery was consumed by fire and ruin, yet the front line was still pushed back disastrously, leaving half of the allied nations engulfed in flames. And around that time, a blond youth suddenly appeared clad in gleaming golden armor. The hero had arrived. At last, the main cast Ivan had been waiting for made their grand entrance, and he finally thought he had pinpointed the world's genre. A traditional hero slays the demon lord fantasy. Explosions boomed above the deep trenches, unleashing a massive shockwave that terrified all the soldiers. The hero's arrival was supposed to bring hope, but unfortunately, on the front line where Ivan fought, colossal worms with fanged maws charged madly at them, and they were still being pushed back miserably. Ivan's age climbed higher once again throughout his time in this other world. As soon as Maximilian made his move, he sliced a demon commander in two. As the hero's party wiped out the generals of the demon army one by one, the tide of the war reversed. They fought valiantly with weapons in hand, and Ivan, having accumulated merit after merit, was assigned to support the hero's party. Rain poured down violently as the sky above the forest darkened, housing the unit tasked with securing liberated zones and mopping up enemy remnants. Shortening that ridiculously long title, Ivan, wielding twin handaxes as he looked down at the hideous beast in the trench, belonged to the cleanup squad. It was a special operations unit deployed whenever the hero's party killed an enemy commander. throwing the enemy camp into chaos and collapse while rain relentlessly battered his worn-down body. Just like that, 2 years passed and his age steadily climbed. Maximilian's party rode proudly on horseback into the capital amidst cheering crowds. The hero's party had slain the demon lord. Ivan showed no emotion at all, merely watching them from above alongside the other soldiers as he decided to await the ending. A moment later, his gaze turned cold as he stared down. Now I can finally get out of this damn world. Yet the years of Ivan's life continued to tick up in steady increments. Inside the castle where the demon lord once ruled, now stood only an empty shell. Though the demon lord had been dead for 2 years, there was still no ending. The city houses lay partially damaged and devastated by war. During that time, the cleanup squad's numbers had dwindled to just 1/5. Ivan's blue pupils remained unchanged, growing increasingly deadened to death as he ruthlessly used his sharp combat skills to eliminate bandit threats, seeing right through High Command's intention to disband the unit. After Ivan carried out a final mission that was practically a suicide run, Ivan, with blue eyes like a ravenous wolf panting after the prolonged battle, submitted his discharge papers in hopes that even this agonizingly long epilogue would finally come to an end. The years Ivan spent in this other world kept adding up, completely against his will. At a grand church surrounded by lush greenery and clear skies, his mother had already passed away 10 years ago. Standing by the gate with a rugged beard taking in the view, he found himself utterly alone upon returning to his hometown. Standing silently before a massive angel statue, Ivan established an orphanage near the capital and took in war orphans. He still stood there hoping for an ending, but nothing happened. Just like that, up until now, the end credits were nowhere in sight. Outside, the silhouettes of children playing merrily under the sun, and their ringing laughter echoed across St. Vasilisa Orphanage. Sporting a thick beard, Ivan sat deadpan inside the library. He seriously jotted down notes in a journal, muttering over and over, "I miss it so much. I really miss it." Ivan used red ink to circle the lines written inside. "I miss it so much I'm going crazy." Sitting with his fingers interlaced in near despair, he questioned himself. It's been 4 years since the demon lord died. When is this damn ending coming? Is the clear condition to wait until the hero grows old and dies? Suddenly, a pair of tall combat boots stepped forward. From inside the room, he picked up on it immediately. Ivan glanced sideways while sliding his chair back, his sharp gaze locking forward. This sound. Listening to the footsteps, Ivan broke down every detail. The distinctive friction of leather, the scent of gunpowder, and the cadence of the stride. Only a single, properly trained soldier. Gripping his custom battle axe in hand, his face was dead serious. The door slowly opened with a familiar creak. Dmitri cheerfully gave a salute to Ivan. "Long time no see, senior. How have you been? I really should have visited you more often." But Ivan answered in a low, gruff voice, "No, Dmitri." Ivan raised his axe high as if ready to pounce. "You should have knocked first." Terrified by the sight, Dmitri frantically waved his hands and protested, "Senior, we've never done things like that. Besides, what's with that beard? It doesn't suit you at all." Hearing that, Ivan relaxed slightly and cut straight to the chase. "Get to the point." Seeing this, Dmitri teased as he held out a letter toward him. "We haven't seen each other in ages and you won't even offer me a seat." Still as hot-tempered as ever. Ivan looked at the letter with mild surprise. "What's this?" Taking off his coat, Dmitri urged him while Ivan remained lost in thought. "Just read it first. It's a personal handwritten letter from Her Royal Highness the Princess." Ivan sighed, still wary as he asked Dmitri, "Is it poisoned?" Dmitri brushed it off nonchalantly and sat down on the long couch opposite him. "It's probably just a normal greeting letter. Hurry up and open it." Ivan remained extremely guarded, looking down. A greeting from Her Royal Highness. He recalled the proud figure of Elizaveta in his memory. Elizaveta Kirillovna Krasilova, someone like the iron-blooded Liza, would never send me a letter just to ask about my health. Hesitating for a second, Ivan spoke up. "Seems like things are getting pretty rough, huh?" Dmitri gave a blank look before venting to Ivan. "Rough is an understatement, senior. The military government keeps whining every day about withdrawing the troops." The two sat facing each other in the room, discussing the situation in Aosen. Crown Prince Alexander wants to slice the country into 5 pieces and sell it off. The atmosphere around them grew heavy, and His Majesty the High King just sits there without uttering a single word. Then Dmitri grinned excitedly and told Ivan. And yet, right at this moment, boom! An international university, the most prestigious institution in the Allied Kingdoms, was founded during the war. Dmitri eagerly continued telling him about the massive academy, throwing in a riddle. "St. Jansk University. Do you have any idea who enrolled as freshmen and faculty this year?" With that, he answered his own question regarding a blonde girl who bore a striking resemblance to Maximilian. Isabel. Next was a valiant young man wielding a long spear. Oscar. The third was an elf girl holding a magic staff. Elfiera. The fourth was a fierce red-haired girl carrying a massive battle axe. Esidice. The fifth was a mysterious girl nimbly dual-wielding daggers. Lucia. Finally, the gentle face of the hero's party saintess surfaced. Patricia. The children of the heroes who defeated the demon lord and the three new deans are none other than the saintesses from the heroes' party back then. Dmitri was thoroughly serious and excited as he recounted all this to Ivan. Since the admission criteria have no age limit whatsoever, promising kids from all over the world prepared to enroll at an early age. Yet despite his upbeat tone, Dmitri's expression turned grim as he trailed off, considering the immense influence wielded by the children of the hero's party. If anything happens to them, if anyone gets hurt or killed. Ivan understood the repercussions all too well upon hearing that, asking simply, "Then this country is finished. What am I supposed to do?" Holding up 3 fingers toward Ivan with a grave look, he replied, "Until those kids return to their homelands without a single hair harmed, please protect them for exactly 3 years." Ivan knitted his brows, thinking with utter seriousness. What kind of hero story ending is this? That hero slays the demon lord and lives happily ever after nonsense was pure bullshit. International tension is a mess, domestic politics are in shambles, and on top of that, deep inside, Ivan was utterly baffled. Now out of nowhere, an academy pops up. Suddenly, Ivan sat bolt upright, as if realizing something. Ivan's expression morphed into sheer panic, pure dread showing in his eyes. Wait a minute. Surging with explosive momentum, Ivan slammed his hand onto the desk, pressing down with enough force to splinter the wood. Ivan crushed down with his grip, shattering a large chunk off the desk. Wait, this whole thing was an academy genre all along. Seeing Ivan's furious outburst, Dmitri's face went pale as he asked, "Senior, what's wrong? Are you okay?" To which Ivan replied in a low, rage-filled growl, "You're asking if I'm okay." Then Ivan fell silent, his hands trembling. "I rolled through mud and blood in this other world for 30 whole years. And all of that was just the damn prologue." Ivan crushed the splintered wood in his grip and slowly pulled his hand back, leaving behind a gaping hole. "If that's how it is," he asked with a scoff of disdain, "all I need to do is help those brats graduate, right? Let's go get this ending." Clenching his hand into a tight fist, sheer excitement and determination flared across his face. "Orders acknowledged. Let's go home, Kim Sunwoo." Kirilovna opened the letter by greeting her old comrade. "Ivan, how have you been? I still hear news about you from time to time. It seems you are living well." She reminisced about the days they spent together. "Do you remember when we toiled away tending the garden? I had hoped we could all share a cup of tea together, yet you walked away without once looking back." She pensively gave warning of the impending situation. "However, Ivan, winter is coming once more. A winter far colder and quieter than the last is drawing near." She gently reached out to touch the green foliage. Memories of the old garden with Ivan flooded back as Kirilovna glanced across the courtyard, earnestly calling out to the comrade she trusted most. "Ivan, my most trusted woodsman." She promised to offer anything in exchange for Ivan's aid. "Whatever your wish may be, I will repay you threefold. If that compensation is still not enough, I will repay you with our friendship. And if even that is not enough to settle the debt, I will pay with our shared memories." Kirilovna concluded the letter with a heartfelt plea. "The kingdom still needs your devotion, as it always has and always will. Sincerely, Kirilovna." In the room, Ivan set the letter down on the desk and calmly responded, "I'm done reading." In short, he quickly grasped Kirilovna's request. "For 3 years, until the hero party's children graduate from the academy, make sure not a single one gets injured or killed, right?" Having realized the true genre of this world, Ivan thought to himself, "To think the genre of this world was an academy story all along. Does that mean I just have to endure 3 more years to reach the ending and go home?" He let out a sigh, looking at his friend standing opposite him, and asked, "Dmitri, who arrives first?" At the question, Dmitri promptly reported his intel. "It's Einar's daughter, Senior. Word is the High King's child is scheduled to depart first." Hearing that familiar name, Ivan instantly froze. Einar. In a flash, he recalled his former comrade's current status. Though he was now called the High King of Drone, when Ivan thought of the former veteran of the hero's party, this was how he remembered the man. In his memory, Einar swung a giant battle axe while roaring out instructions. "Hey, Brat Ivan, this is how you swing an axe." Ivan quietly brooded over the first person heading to the academy, feeling utterly helpless knowing that the person he had to protect was the daughter of that madman. In the kingdom of Drone, the citizens excitedly cheered for their princess. "We're so proud. The greatest scion of Drone, carrying the blood of the great conqueror Einar, you will surely conquer everything." At the harbor, a massive crowd gathered as a crisp female voice rang out. Flushed from the flattery, the girl yelled, "You guys keep teasing me. Fine, just wait and see." Someone in the crowd boasted merrily, "Of course, whose kid do you think she is?" The onlookers recalled the rumor sweeping the kingdom. "Did you hear the news?" The people around quickly asked in curiosity as the noise grew chaotic. "What is it? What happened?" The person leaned in and whispered mysteriously, "Word is, she's going there to conquer an entire symphony orchestra." Stepping off the ship, a girl with brick-red hair clutching an instrument case roared at the top of her lungs, "What's wrong with playing in an orchestra?" This was Esidice, eldest daughter of the berserker Einar. She scoffed coldly, boldly declaring to the crowd, sending her off, "Just keep your eyes wide open and watch how successful I'll be." The system registered the name. Eldest daughter Esidice enrolled in the Department of Instrumental Music, St. Jansk University Conservatory. The train carrying her crossed the bridge amid the freezing, snowy mountains. The Knights Templar had seen Esidice off from the kingdom in a grand ceremony, and 2 days later, a sudden train accident struck as the speeding locomotive hurtled forward amidst showers of fiery red sparks, veering off the rails and heading straight toward a catastrophic derailment. Shifting scenes, Dmitri looked completely astonished at Ivan's firm assertion. "Wait, a train terrorist attack out of nowhere. Are you certain about this, senior?" Ivan confirmed his prediction without a moment's hesitation. "That's right. And do you know why?" The room grew steadily gloomier as he calmly delivered a reason that left Dmitri completely baffled. "Because this is an academy story, after all." Ivan recalled the familiar tropes of the hero genre. In traditional hero stories, the protagonist and their companions journey forth to defeat the demon lord. He continued listing the plot points bound to happen. One of the loyal subordinates would invariably stand by the hero's side. Finally came the classic conclusion of every hero's tale. At the end of the journey, peace would be restored to the world. Ivan understood that every story operated according to its own set of rules, and all of these elements formed what could be called the inherent logic of a genre. Just like that, every single genre had its own immutable laws. As the letter burned away in the flames, he recalled the events from 30 years ago. 30 years ago, Ivan forced his dormant memories to awaken, digging back into the contents of the dossier that had just been burned to ashes. In his memory, the exact location of the incident materialized with crystal clarity. Igorovich Station, the site where the enrollment train hijacking would take place. Present at the station, Ivan quietly investigated while holding a newspaper, completely convinced that the terrorist attack was an absolute certainty of the narrative. Glancing at his pocket watch, he realized the event he was waiting for was about to unfold right here. The current time was 9 o'clock, and the train carrying Princess Esidice was scheduled to pull into the station shortly. Ivan surveyed the entire station, deducing the exact spot where the enemy would strike. If anyone is targeting Princess Esidice, it's bound to be this station right along the border. First, they need to cross the border to successfully shift the blame onto the kingdom. And since a military zone lies just beyond this station, the security checkpoints will be tightly guarded. He quietly stood up and made his departure, admitting to the flaws in his own plan. "Naturally, since I lacked any concrete evidence, I didn't request military reinforcements." "How amateurish," he muttered, continuing to observe the deserted station. His eyes quickly locked onto a suspicious vegetable vendor smoking a cigarette in front of a stall. Ivan silently scrutinized everyone present. Among the people at the station, the man acting like he was checking train schedules had let 3 trains pass by already, and he glanced over at the man pretending to sell vegetables and instantly spotted the abnormality. A guy trying to sell veggies while glancing around nervously is even more ridiculous. Who on earth would buy vegetables at a desolate ghost town station like this? He's even smoking right in front of his produce. Ivan slowly walked up from behind, his cold gaze locking onto the suspicious man sitting on the bench. The man jumped in sheer fright the moment he realized someone had closed in on him, his face draining of color in a panic. Ivan drew his pistol and aimed it straight at the man's head, subduing him swiftly before he could even react. The operative was startled by his sudden appearance and shouted furiously, "Who the hell?" Ivan nudged the barrel forward, closed the distance, and whispered coldly, "Quiet." An accomplice in the distance spotted the unusual situation and roared at the top of his lungs, "Hey, what are you doing over there? Stop right now." Ivan calmly observed the enemy's reaction and made a silent deduction. How ridiculous. From that angle, the handgun should have been completely obscured from view. They shouldn't have been able to see it at all. Just to be safe, I'll run one final confirmation. He aimed his gun straight at the adversary and interrogated him with a chilly voice. Where does your true loyalty lie? The man stammered in utter shock at Ivan's abrupt question, his panicked expression giving away his suspicious nature. What? Without waiting for the opponent to formulate a counter, Ivan coldly pulled the trigger and executed him on the spot. The gunshot left the remaining thugs frozen in dead silence as the man collapsed limply onto the floor, his pooling blood serving as a chilling warning. Based on their reactions, Ivan instantly deduced the identities of everyone present at the station. These people were neither military reinforcements nor loyal royal agents. If they were elite-trained agents, they would have immediately stated their military unit instead of firing back with questions. They were all cut from the same rotten cloth. Realizing their cover was blown, the leader panicked and barked the order to attack. Damn it! Fire! Shoot that bastard down! Ivan smoothly evaded the incoming bullets like a ferocious beast. Too amateurish. They don't belong to the royal administration. The terrorists opened fire in unison, but he vanished right through the line of fire before anyone could lock onto him. Ivan swept his battle axe horizontally at terrifying speed, a single slash shearing away the arms of the closest thugs. He plunged straight into the heart of the enemy formation and initiated a relentless slaughter. And finally, Ivan pivoted smoothly amid the encirclement, delivering a series of decisive slashes that rapidly swept away the remaining thugs, until finally, he looked coldly at the men trembling before his overwhelming strength. They've never faced anyone with genuine power before. The wounded man stared in horror at his severed arm and shrieked in agony. My arm. Corpses lay strewn about in total disarray as Ivan stood amidst the fallen men, gripping his battle axe with calm composure and issuing a warning. If you don't stop the bleeding, you'll be dead in 3 minutes. Lowering his gaze to the dying man, he resumed his interrogation. Where are the others? Terrified, the man spilled the location of his accomplices to beg for his life. There are 15 guys down by the tracks. You can't take them all by yourself. I'll help you, please save my life. He desperately tried to use information about the ringleader to persuade Ivan. The real boss is an absolute monster. If you spare my life, I can draw his attention for you. Ivan quickly pieced together the group's role at the station. So you guys are just the vanguard unit. The man nodded frantically. Yes, spare my life and I'll cooperate with you. I can be extremely useful. Ignoring his plea, Ivan pressed on. Did you hear anything about who is on that train? The man immediately blurted out the intel he had received. I heard it's a gold bullion transport train. They said it's just a regular commercial cargo shipment being sent to the kingdom. Ivan tightened his grip on his axe. The man looked up at him with flickering hope and asked carefully, You'll spare my life, right? I answered everything you asked honestly. Ivan coldly dismissed his claim. No, there was a lie mixed in there. The man turned pale with panic, utterly clueless about where he had messed up. What? What are you talking about? To avoid any further complications, Ivan poured all his strength into his battle axe and brought it down to finish off the last thug before he could rise. So much for you being useful. Shifting scenes, the station clock ticked past the remaining minutes. The current time was 9:54 a.m. Ivan calmly wiped the blood from his hands, calculating his cleanup speed. The time it takes for an extermination squad member to clean up corpses and bloodstains. 5 minutes. Standing alone in the deserted station, he continued his calculations. Cleanup will wrap up at 9:58, leaving me a 2-minute buffer before the train arrives. Having sanitized the crime scene, Ivan stood coldly amid the drifting leaves, his expression as serene as if no battle had ever taken place. What a tedious waste of time. Kirilovna calmly inquired about the whereabouts of her old comrade. And what about Ivan? Her subordinate bowed and reported Ivan's recent actions. He suspects a train terrorist attack is going to happen, Your Grace, and he even pinned down the time and location with remarkable precision. Kirilovna suspected that Ivan possessed a secret intelligence network. Does Ivan have informants or eyes everywhere? Dmitri immediately denied it. No, Your Grace. There hasn't been a single sign of anything like that over the past 4 years. Kirilovna let out a chuckle, prompting Dmitri to speak up warily. My lady, she sighed, gazing into the distance as she issued an order to Dmitri. Monitor every single move Ivan makes. Track his every step down to the most trivial actions, write them down, and bring the reports back to me. Kirilovna wanted to keep tabs on every development surrounding Ivan, so she could check on him at any moment. Her eyes burned with resentment as she recalled the look Ivan wore when he left to carry out his final mission 4 years ago. It's exactly the same look you had when you set out on your final mission 4 years ago. Even though that action was based purely on guesswork, you always exude this strange, unshakable confidence. The train carrying Essidici continued barreling across the snowy mountains, speeding straight toward the spot where Ivan lay in wait. The conspirators tightly clutched their detonator switches to execute the plan, while Kirilovna thought to herself, I know for certain. Moments later, Ivan vaulted through the blinding snowstorm, quickly giving chase to the moving train ahead. Kirilovna believed his prediction would manifest as reality once again, because that was simply how Academy stories worked. The train bombing was bound to happen. Essidici sat quietly by the train window, completely oblivious to the lethal trap waiting ahead. Ivan knew that this terrorist attack couldn't alter the destiny of key individuals. It would never be able to harm the protagonist or major characters. Explosives had been secretly planted along the tracks by the terrorists, with the train bombing taking place right before the start of the semester. All because this was the mandatory tutorial phase. The ringleader gripped the detonator switch tightly, smugly convinced that pressing the button would complete the entire operation. The tutorial phase is just the stage for players to get acquainted with the game. Just push the button and everything will be over. Therefore, his fingers slowly pressed down on the red button, officially triggering the train bombing. A violent explosion instantly engulfed the engine car, shaking the train violently amidst a sea of flames. Ivan nonchalantly revealed his true plan. From the very beginning, I never had any intention of stopping this train bombing. Essidici clutched her head in a panic amid the deafening explosions, remaining safe because the tutorial phase has to be handled by the protagonist, whereas the ringleader, broke into a sadistic grin, fully convinced the prey on the train was dead. All right, let's go plunder the train. Ivan sprang into action right then and there. I'll use this opportunity to uncover the organization pulling the strings behind this terrorist conspiracy. He sprinted off at breakneck speed. And afterward, I'll wipe that organization out right at the academy. Ivan vanished behind the thick veil of snow to avoid a direct confrontation, carrying out his intelligence operations from the shadows. As he moved, he gripped his gun and battle axe tightly, ready to eliminate any threat appearing along his path. I'll root out these threats completely. Amid the blazing inferno, Ivan coldly pulled the trigger, kicking off his hunt for the people who had targeted Essidici's train. This was how the extermination squad operated. Billows of thick black smoke rolled into the air following the blast, blanketing the snowy mountain region. The derailed train lay overturned amidst a sea of flames, leaving a scene of utter devastation. The terrorists swarmed around the wrecked train and cheered. We're insanely rich now. One of them excitedly calculated how to fence the loot. All we need to do is scrape off the royal insignia, melt it down, and sell it on the black market. We'll be drowning in cash, boss. The ringleader immediately urged his subordinates. All right, hurry up and clean this place up. Just as he spoke, he suddenly froze, a premonition of danger instantly tightening his facial expressions. An abrupt counterattack struck with terrifying speed, plunging the terrorists into utter chaos. One thug was sent flying headfirst into the ground while the others looked around in panic, completely clueless about who had just struck. What the hell? Fear was a trait exclusive to the weak. A terrified terrorist glared toward the source of the noise and roared. Damn it, who's there? Ivan instantly recognized their inferior caliber. That reaction proves not a single one of them has the ability to perceive bullet trajectories. The ringleader gritted his teeth and glared at Ivan as he strolled out unhurriedly, bellowing, You bastard! Emerging from the smoke with a gun in each hand, Ivan coldly interrogated the man standing before him. Are you the leader? The panicked ringleader ordered all his subordinates to open fire. Shoot him down right now. Ivan narrowed his eyes, instantly sensing the killing intent directed straight at him. He focused entirely on feeling the murderous aura radiating from the incoming bullets. This was what they called trajectory perception. Thanks to this ability, Ivan easily read the precise firing angles of his enemies, preparing to dodge and counterattack. As the terrorists opened fire one by one, he serenely evaded the hail of bullets and recalled a memory. Firearms are utterly useless against anyone who surpasses a certain threshold of power. Because of the killing intent carried throughout battle, Ivan sensed the crisscrossing bullet paths around him. Reading every single attack vector, bullets and weapons always gave themselves away. He tightened his grip on his firearm, recalling the basic combat knowledge of mana users. When dealing with handheld weapons, concealing murderous intent with mana is a fundamental lesson. However, doing the same for flying objects like bullets or arrows is exceptionally difficult. Ivan spun through the countless tangled trajectories, gracefully dodging every single incoming bullet. He vaulted straight into the middle of the formation, dodging bullet paths while gunning down the closest thug. Bullets and weapons always give themselves away. Before the enemy could close in, Ivan drew his sidearm and pulled the trigger in the blink of an eye, a bullet piercing straight through the enemy's head as he silently probed their strength. That's how you gauge an enemy's power. Ivan plowed right into the thick of the terrorist ranks and coldly commenced the purge. And to weed out the weak, a terrified terrorist watched in horror as Ivan struck down his men one by one in the blink of an eye. "You damn bastard!" The ringleader attacked while shouting in furious interrogation. "Who sent you? Where did this mad dog come from?" But Ivan was faster than his thoughts. He dodged a blade and shattered the offensive stance in an instant, leaving his opponent stunned by the cold countermaneuver. A punch to the gut sent the man flying backward. Before he could even properly recover his footing, Ivan batted him down directly into a deep trench. The ground caved inward from the horrific impact, leaving both him and the onlookers frozen in silence. Gritting his teeth, the man uttered a threat. "I've memorized your face. Just you wait, Ivan cut the ringleader off with a cold question. "Are you really that good at remembering faces?" He drew a prepped firearm, letting out a smile that made the ringleader feel deeply uneasy. Ivan recognized the true identity of the man standing before him. This guy must be the tutorial boss. Since he's meant for the male lead, I have no intention of killing him. However, he kept the ringleader alive to squeeze every bit of information out of him. "Answer me right now. If you hold anything back, I know countless ways to inflict agony without leaving permanent injuries." Shifting scenes prior to her departure, Eurydice sternly warned the father who kept trying to secretly follow and protect her. "Absolutely not. Under no circumstances are you allowed to follow me, father. If there is even the slightest chance." She resolutely declared the consequences should Einar dare to tail her behind her back. "If I catch you following me, I'll disown you as my father." Staring at his daughters retreating back, Einar stood dumbfounded upon hearing her definitive warning. "Eurydice, does that mean?" He looked enlightened, swiftly finding a loophole in Eurydice's words. "As long as we aren't caught, it'll be fine." Einar secretly summoned the most trustworthy warriors of Drone. "That is why I have gathered all of you here." He looked around and loudly sought someone capable of secretly protecting his daughter. "Which of you warriors will protect Eurydice without getting caught at all?" A warrior immediately stepped forward to confidently take on the mission. "Right here." A fellow comrade suddenly appeared behind him, leaving the entire group instantly stiffening. Who the hell are these guys? The warriors who once struck terror into countless enemies were a band of berserkers. Now they were men acknowledged as brothers by their lord, and Einar had plenty of younger brothers just like this. He quickly realized that disguises wouldn't fool his daughter. "Eurydice already knows all your faces. Even if you disguise yourselves and board the train, she'll spot you immediately." Therefore, Einar immediately proposed a plan that left all the warriors dumbfounded. "Which of you warriors is going to chase down the train using your own 2 feet?" His warriors stepped forward in unison without asking for any rewards. Right here, brothers offered nothing but unwavering loyalty. The men utterly loyal to Einar were known by this title in Drone, the retainers of the household. Einar looked at his brothers with satisfaction and issued a more crucial mission. "Good, perfect. Now we need to pick one of you to enroll at St. Jansk University and protect our daughter. So among you." He looked around and asked a question that instantly sucked the fighting spirit right out of the room. "Whoever is confident in their written exams, raise your hand." Amidst the murmurs, a single hand rose hesitantly. The retainers immediately flinched at the challenge, finding it scarier than a battlefield. "Absurd. Written exams, I'd rather choose death." Amidst a moment where no one else dared step forward, Mord Eriksson Huskarl abruptly stepped up to take the mission. "I'll give it a try, my lord." The system displayed the warrior's name, Mord Eriksson Huskarl. Everyone patted Mord Eriksson on the shoulder, enthusiastically encouraging their brother. "Don't worry, brother. No matter how hard their exams are, how bad could it possibly get?" Einar sealed his future with a single sentence. "Good, go ahead, brother. From now on, you are a freshman in the Department of Physical Education." Mord Eriksson accepted the order with absolute seriousness and swore to protect Eurydice with his life. "Understood, my lord. I will protect Eurydice with my very life." Mord Eriksson had carried out Einar's orders starting 2 months ago. This man was the one who had secretly infiltrated the academy. Contrary to everyone's worries, he sailed through the entrance exams smoothly, passing the written tests with flying colors beyond expectations, and gaining admission into the physical education department. Even so, Mord Ericsson's written exam scores were nothing to brag about. Naturally, he had merely scraped past the passing grade with the bare minimum score. Quite a few proctors stared in utter disbelief at the absurdity of it all. Mord Ericsson gained admission solely because his athletic achievements far surpassed every other applicant, made possible by setting a brand new record in the practical exam. The proctors stared in shock at Mord Ericsson's superhuman physical prowess. Is this guy even a student? His physical stats are staggering. Indeed, that overwhelming strength was the pride of the warriors loyal to Einar. The story of Mord Ericsson began on a freezing midwinter day. One day in January, after using sheer human endurance to chase the train across a vast expanse, after running behind the train for 2 day and night cycles without a single moment of rest or sleep, he became a freshman in the Department of Physical Education. Mord Ericsson ran while desperately shouting Esidici's name. "Esidici, wait for me. Which bastards dare lay a finger on my niece?" The interior of the train reeked heavily of corpses mingled with charred ashes. Esidici tried to pull herself up in confusion, leaning against the wall and gasping for breath. What on earth is happening? She began to harbor suspicions. Don't tell me this is a robbery. Reflecting on the situation, Esidici felt anxious, realizing she had no bodyguards by her side. What am I supposed to do? Because I threatened to disown anyone who followed me, I don't even have a single escort with me now. Suddenly, she cried out in joy upon seeing that her violin case remained completely intact. Esidici clutched her beloved instrument and let out a sigh of relief. Thank goodness. Little violin, I was so worried you got broken. Suddenly, an unfamiliar sound echoed from outside, making her eyes widen in fright. Without a word of warning, the train door blew open in an explosion, causing Esidici to shriek in terror. The smoke gradually cleared to reveal the intruders storming inside. Her arm trembled rhythmically. The terrorist spotted Esidici hiding nearby and broke into a sinister grin. "Look what we have here." His underlings stared at her with hungry eyes. "What the hell is that? Is that a girl?" The ringleader, driven to absolute despair by Ivan's interrogation, begged for release. "Just kill me." Ivan calmly continued treating his wounds. "It's all right. You definitely won't die." Clinging to Ivan's leg, the man begged tearfully for an end to his misery. "Kill me." Ivan gripped his blood-stained axe tightly, feigning a troubled expression at the desperate plea. "Don't say such terrifying things." His eyes flashed with a cruelty never seen before. Bede writhed in agonizing torment as Ivan poured a special medicine over his wounds. "Stop it. Don't add any more. Do anything you want, just not that." He screamed in agony as his wounds were slowly eaten away. Ivan recalled a question once posed. What do frontline soldiers hate the most? A flood of answers came to mind. Hardtack, senior officers, commanding officers, the enemy, and Bede suffered through the agony of the medicine sinking into his flesh. It was a recovery potion. Pain is understood best by those who have lived through it. At the hospital, a piercing scream echoed out. "I'd rather you just chop my arm off." A nearby nurse tried to calm him down. "Don't say such frightening things. If you leave it like this, we'll actually have to amputate your arm, Senior Ivan. Your body is the treasure of our nation." Ivan felt furious at being treated like a living experimental subject, thinking, who on earth treats a national treasure like this? Ivan recalled the first time he had to endure that terrible medicine from his youth when he lacked experience, remembering how the nurse poured the medicine onto his wound, and gently encouraged him that he could hold on just one more time and to let her know if it hurt, after which he always tried his best to avoid getting severely injured. This cursed medicine forces you to experience the full agony of slow healing all at once. After testing the medicine's effects himself, Ivan discovered another use for it that was truly astonishing, leaving his comrades in the extermination squad unable to suppress their admiration. He repeatedly healed the wound and then resumed interrogating the leader, recovering through the medicine, interrogating again, and healing once more, making it truly. The leader completely broke down and begged, pleading that he didn't know anything else and begging to be killed, serving as a method that forces any prisoner to tell the truth. A flawless confession serum. Ivan refused the leader's plea for death, continuing to pour the medicine like watering a plant, and telling him he needed to stay alive since he was likely a tutorial boss with no reason to be killed. He kindly brought the surviving leader back to the train, nodding that while he was kind enough to carry him all the way there. The fact that the leader couldn't even remember who ordered the terrorist attack proved he was just a low-level cannon fodder soldier. Ivan deduced that someone had used magic to conceal the leader's memories, wondering if a cognitive impairment spell had been cast on him. He suddenly sensed an object hurtling toward him at a terrifying speed, along a direct trajectory. Ivan focused on identifying the target of the incoming attack, wondering where it was aiming, between his eyes. No, he realized the boulder was large enough to crush his entire head, his entire face. Damn it, he barely managed to lean out of the way and dodge it. Ivan knew that using a gun to counter such raw strength was utterly pointless, and trying to shoot back would be useless. He seriously evaluated the strength of whoever had thrown the boulder at him, realizing that hurling a rock with this much force meant they were far stronger than expected. A loud explosion echoed across the area, and thick black smoke obscured Ivan. Assuming the opponent also had enough experience to detect bloodlust and bullet trajectories, it was safe to assume the rival also knew how to sense incoming projectile. Ivan looked toward the direction the boulder came from and issued a cold challenge, telling them to come out. Heavy, menacing footsteps slowly rang out. Mord Eriksson stepped out from the shadows with an oppressive aura capable of crushing others, grunting that it seemed he had quite a bit of skill. Ivan swung his axe and stepped back defensively. The man let out a cold laugh, explaining that, commissioned by the king, Mord Eriksson had emerged with blinding rage over his tortured granddaughter, rebuking Ivan for being foolish enough to touch a single hair on her head compared to his actual skills. Ivan scoffed and lunged straight forward, realizing he had miscalculated because this guy wasn't a tutorial boss after all, but rather the boss's relative. He gripped his combat weapon tightly with both hands. Ivan issued a cold warning to Mord Eriksson before the battle began, telling him that for his own good, he better know something, since after the whole terrorist incident, this guy was the real mastermind. Mord Eriksson fiercely swung his axe straight forward. Ivan agilely dodged his attack. He was startled by Mord Eriksson's terrifying strength, finding it strange that this guy was so powerful. Ivan spun his weapon around in his hand a few times. He quickly launched a counterattack against the man's blows, wondering if his prediction had been wrong since he was certain this was supposed to be the tutorial section. Mord Eriksson reacted quickly and seized the upper hand, though Ivan managed to dodge just in time, shocked that someone committing robbery could possess this kind of skill, or wondering if someone else was pulling the strings from the shadows. The two sides clashed in a fierce, chaotic struggle. Their sharp weapons collided, creating harsh, screeching metallic noises. Ivan heightened his resolve for his goal concerning Princess Esidice, one of the main characters. As he looked at Mord Eriksson, who was also fighting to win, the man was thinking of one person: his beloved granddaughter Esidice. Both stood on different sides, yet shared the same goal to save someone, swearing they had to rescue the girl. Meanwhile, elsewhere, an explosion sent up thick, billowing smoke. Inside, several thugs were cornering Esidice amidst her desperate pleas, pleading for them to please stop. One of them licked his lips despicably, remarking that he had thought she was just an ordinary survivor. Right as he was speaking, he took a heavy impact to the face, thinking it wasn't half bad. Esidice had used her beloved violin to attack him, crying out in tearful apology as she struck him with her violin. Her blow sent the guy flying up to the ceiling where his head got stuck. The remaining two thugs witnessed the scene and muttered under their breath that she was formidable. Esidice clutched her instrument while trembling, tears streaming down her face as she addressed them. She mourned for her violin, crying out that they had hurt Kang, her 2-year-old violin, calling them crazy bastards. Outside, Ivan recalled some information about her, nodding that Princess Esidice shared many traits with her mother, but her father was a real disaster. Esidice sobbed while praising how wonderful her instrument had been. The robbers were caught slightly off guard, completely terrified by her previous strike as they shouted at each other to run away quickly to their boss. The girl raised her instrument high once more, charging at the thugs while shouting her violin's name in mourning: Kang. Her eyes overflowed with murderous intent as she vowed to avenge it, marking the exact moment the strongest music student on Earth was born. The battle on Ivan's side wasn't over yet, and amidst the clash, he heard a loud, approaching scream for help. Another thug was blasted into the air amid the shouts of his accomplices, screaming in madness that she was crazy and telling everyone to run. Ivan and Mord Eriksson paused their fight, distracted by the commotion as Ivan grew slightly worried and challenged the fleeing thugs, demanding to know what happened to the red-haired girl and whether Esidice was safe, while Mord Eriksson echoed the exact same question about his granddaughter. The two of them suddenly realized they shared the exact same objective. Ivan jumped out of the skirmish and questioned the thug closely, asking if the person who used the recovery potion earlier wasn't his relative. The system suddenly popped up with the revelation that a train robbery in a school-themed story could never kill off a main character, because a helper would always appear to assist, making Ivan let out a soft realization as he confirmed if this guy was Esidice's helper. Mord Erickson slowly calmed down and asked with suspicion, demanding to know if he wasn't in cahoots with those bastards. Ivan instantly denied it, wondering why the man misunderstood, prompting Mord Erickson to point out his reason for suspicion, that Ivan had just poured a healing potion on that bastard earlier. Ivan mentally recalled that it was one of the interrogation methods used by the extermination squad, remembering someone once yelling at him for it, asking if he was crazy for using medicine that way. After a brief silence, Ivan gave a vague explanation that he had some investigations to run, causing Mord Erickson to understand and remark that he should have said so from the beginning. He quickly shifted his attention elsewhere. Mord Erickson looked toward the furious Esidice and shouted her name. He quickly checked on her, asking if his granddaughter was safe, to which she immediately recognized him and called out to her uncle. Ivan quietly observed them, thinking back to 7 years ago when he had first seen the target Esidice. Images of Esidice and her young voice flashed through his mind as she called out to her uncle, remembering she was just a child back then, though she probably still remembered him. Watching the two reunite, Ivan confirmed the target was safe, and her helper was fully capable of escorting her all the way to the academy, realizing it would cause major trouble if his identity got exposed here. Esidice noticed the direction where he had been standing. Finding no one there except the thugs, she asked her uncle if someone had been standing there just now, unaware that Ivan had already left as it was time to retreat. Mord Erickson silently stared in that direction. Recalling the previous battle, he deduced that the fighting style looked identical to the Krasilov Special Forces. Analyzing his opponent's movements, he thought the way the guy wielded his axe looked extremely familiar, bearing a striking resemblance to Senior Einar's axe technique. Piecing it together, Mord Erickson arrived at the only name that fit all the criteria. If he came from Krasilov and learned axe techniques from Einar, it could only be one person, the hero candidate, Ivan Petrovich. Rubbing his chin, he asked Esidice if she remembered anyone named Ivan, which instantly excited her as she happily confirmed that she definitely remembered Uncle Ivan. Walking together, Esidice excitedly described him as a great, kind, and cool guy, though Mord Erickson replied that he wasn't so sure about the cool part. Hearing rumors that Ivan had died 2 years ago, Mord Erickson remarked that he never would have recognized him if he hadn't shaved off his beard. Elsewhere, Ivan let out a NH letter 1EB9 relief sigh. Leaning his back against the wall and watching the flowing water, he mentally muttered that it was a tiring day for the amount of money earned. Einar's eldest daughter, Esidice, had arrived safely, likely dispatched as a Huskarl agent to ensure the target's successful security. Inside the magnificent and grand palace, a letter reported that Einar's eldest daughter had arrived safely, prompting Ivan to voice his approval with a single word. The letter continued with other updates. Isabel, the daughter of hero Maximilian from the Kingdom of Thils, set off during the first week of February, just days apart, while Oscar, the son of the knight Gilles Vert, departed from the Kingdom of Thils, leading Ivan to assess that since their relations with those countries weren't bad and the distance was short, there was nothing to worry about. After all, the daughter of the mage Vialgrin was arriving by airship. Enrique's disciple, Lucia, was already inside the capital. Ivan leaned back into his chair in deep thought, muttering that since he really didn't want to run into her, this turned out for the best, wondering if clearing 2 more train hijacking incidents would finally bring the newbie tutorial section to a close. Biting the cap off his pen as he thought it over, he concluded that what he needed to do now was, he scribbled down the food items he wanted to eat upon returning to Earth, focusing solely on kimchi stew, or better yet, something even better. He circled a specific dish prominently, spicy rice cakes tteokbokki. Ivan meticulously described it, nodding it wasn't the delivery sauce style nor from any franchise brand, but specifically the kind sold right outside school gates. Lowering his head with a longing wish to go home, a face appeared outside his window glass accompanied by a voice asking if he was planning to abandon them again. Ivan immediately turned around to look at the source of the voice. Surprised, he asked her when she got there, recognizing her as 17-year-old Priscilla, an orphanage member who cheerfully replied that she had been there ever since the principal started mumbling about the foods he wanted to eat. Ivan stepped aside to dodge her and calmly asked how she even got up there. Priscilla confidently explained that she was in the graduation class and studied very hard in school, leaving Ivan in disbelief as he noted they were on the 3rd floor, silently questioning whether scaling walls was part of the orphanage curriculum. Walking outside together with Priscilla, who excitedly shouted that she won and asked if he knew it, Ivan reminded her to use the hallway next time because it was dangerous. Far off in a corner of the wall, A figure was observing Ivan's every move. It was a group of kids tracking him, playing their favorite game of trying to get close without getting caught by the principal. A boy threw a baseball hard toward Ivan, living up to the rumor that the man named Ivan could catch anything flying toward him from behind without even looking, and that he was a mysterious man who could find hiding children in a single round. The caught kid turned pale with shock. Above all else, Ivan walked over and picked the boy up, placing him on his shoulders, thinking how despite his appearance, his gentle personality made him one of the kids' best playmates, and Ivan had never stopped them from doing this. Everyone cheered happily when they saw the principal. All of it was part of Ivan's calculations, believing that if these kids could reach a level where they could bypass his senses, they would be able to stand firmly on their own 2 feet even after leaving this place. With 2 weeks left until the next group of hero kids boarded the train, he thought to himself that until then, it was freedom. That evening, heavy rain poured outside the window. Priscilla had been captured, shouting fiercely to warn them that if their principal found out, they were dead meat. But the captors ignored her and demanded to know whose faction she belonged to, telling her to shut her mouth and stop talking about that old principal. Growing increasingly impatient, they demanded to know where she learned how to hide her presence like that. Asking who her principal actually was, Priscilla confidently blurted out the name Ivan Petrovich. Asking if they had heard of him before, the 2 captors mulled over the name Ivan Petrovich, before bursting into mocking laughter, asking who hadn't heard of him, disparaging the name by pointing out that Ivan was the most common name in Krasilov and Petrovich was the most common surname. Another voice chimed in from outside, telling them to hold on. A girl stepped forward with a serious tone, demanding to know who they had just mentioned. Priscilla broke down in tears, her voice trembling as she called out for the principal, repeating Ivan's full name once more, Ivan Petrovich. At the same time, people from the orphanage rushed in to report to Ivan, informing him that a child from the orphanage had been kidnapped and asking if he remembered Priscilla, to which he replied that he did. Ivan observed the symbol left behind on a piece of cloth, a faint cross mark on Priscilla's clothing, recognizing it as the emblem belonging to that malicious organization, expressing his own concern that while she was the person he least wanted to see, he had no other choice, meaning this would require some schedule adjustments, knowing full well that place as a call from an old master, the place he once belonged to. After all, the extermination squad itself was created by her. The other person let out a mocking chuckle, remarking that the brat had claimed he was going to retire, yet he was secretly building an assassination squad behind the scenes, and that woman was Enrique. Without hesitation, Ivan headed toward South Prizhenkaya, knowing only that the dungeon sewer built by Enrique was located there. Reaching the place in less than 3 hours, he looked up slightly, realizing it was his first time seeing it in person. Right in the center of Prizhenkaya's central garden stood a memorial with statues of the departing hero, the unknown hero, and the goddess of victory. One day after the Demon King died and the war ended, the townspeople panicked upon realizing the unknown hero statue had suddenly vanished, wondering how anyone could haul away an entire statue right in the middle of the capital and steal it without facing any consequences, realizing the only reason it was possible was because memorializing them was Enrique's right, since Kevika had been a member of the hero's party, concluding that since they were blades too sharp to be used in peacetime, Enrique's disbandment of the extermination squad and her theft of the statue definitely meant something. Spotting something unfamiliar, Ivan wondered if that extra inscription had always been on the monument, reading the lines carved into the stone, that even if their names were forgotten, their glory would last forever. Speaking on behalf of everyone not present, Ivan read out the names carved there: Elizaveta, Kirilovna, Krasilov, and Enrique. Ivan closed his eyes gently and lowered his head slightly, telling himself not to mourn those who departed before them, opening his eyes after a brief pause, adding that it was because he stood in the exact same ranks as them. Several cracks appeared on the ground beneath him. A slight tremor shook the spot where Ivan stood. He stood still, as if he had anticipated it. The circular platform lowered Ivan down into an underground room. A flat voice echoed from across the room, nodding that she still remembered it. Without even raising her head, Enrique already knew who had appeared, greeting little Ivan after 7 years since their last face-to-face meeting. Known as Enrique, the assassin of the former hero's party, Ivan recalled her glorious past from 100 years ago when she betrayed and drained the blood of the elder vampire who had bitten her, ending the reign of evil vampires across Prizhenkaya as a hero, while also operating as an assassin who took countless lives under the guise of fulfilling requests. And as the master swordsman who founded the extermination squad, his grandmaster, earning her the title of a traitor. Enrique set down her teacup and noted he hadn't taken a single sip yet, teasing him by asking if he was afraid of being poisoned since it was getting cold. To which Ivan mentally replied that he didn't mind, because he came from a country where people drank iced coffee. Keeping those thoughts to himself, he cut straight to the point and asked where Priscilla was, prompting Enrique to comment on how he always got straight to business just like always. Before advising him not to be so uptight, Enrique let out a mocking laugh, saying that it made him look so amateurish. Ivan shivered as a blade was thrown right toward him. Enrique's gaze turned intensely sharp, as she remarked that she remembered teaching him that such hostility should be reserved strictly for prey. A snake formed from spiritual energy crawled along with her calm voice as she said, "Don't worry about that child. I haven't bitten her yet, and I'm taking very good care of her." By this time, Ivan could already feel the oppressive, murderous intent, prompting Enrique to continue questioning. "Now it's your turn to answer." She wanted to know clearly what on earth he was plotting. Receiving no answer, Enrique grew slightly impatient and asked again, "I'm asking what you're plotting by gathering all those orphans together." She thought to herself, "You brat, when I heard you adopted an orphan after retiring, I actually thought it was so cute. But things didn't seem that simple, and training an agent capable of executing ambush techniques to perfection in just 2 years before sending her over felt essentially like an act of defiance, as if to tell her that he was opening a murder training facility right in their own backyard. Enrique felt that this was definitely a declaration of war, right? Still staring intently at Ivan, she added that deep down she was actually a bit disappointed. "It hurts, you know," she thought, looking him up and down from head to toe to evaluate him. "And what's with that silly mustache? It's driving me crazy. Why is he wearing clothes that went out of style a whole century ago? Don't tell me that's a disguise." Seeing Ivan's serious, if looks could kill reaction only made her more displeased as she continued. "I invited you here because I didn't want to fight, yet you're giving me this if you touch me you die attitude. What on earth are you thinking?" At that moment, Ivan was also wondering what to do about this situation, thinking, "Enrique, what am I plotting? Just how much of this am I supposed to tell her?" He slowly analyzed. 4 years after the Demon King's death, the kingdom of Krasilov looks peaceful on the outside, but it's actually split in two, getting caught up in the struggle for the throne between the crown prince, who was ready to risk starting an external war, and Princess Elizaveta, who sought to maintain internal peace. To prevent a war, the princess even redeployed an agent who had faked his death to ensure the key figures enrolling in the Grand Academy graduate safely. "And that agent is me," Ivan thought, still not quite grasping her intent when she asked what he was plotting. Ivan had a million questions running through his head. "Enrique knows full well I'm carrying out the mission assigned by Elizaveta, but why is she asking about the details of my mission? Could it be that Enrique is no longer on Elizaveta's side?" A possibility crossed Ivan's mind. If so, don't tell me this woman has sided with the crown prince. Both Ivan and Enrique Kevica stood on opposite sides while harboring the exact same question toward each other. What on earth is that lunatic thinking? What on earth is that lunatic thinking? After a moment of silence, Ivan finally spoke up. "I heard you're raising a disciple, and she's scheduled to enroll at St. Jansky University. This was the only approach he could think of right then. "Right, this is something we can resolve through conversation." Enrique wanted to hear more, prompting, and then Ivan smoothly went along with it. "My client has shown interest, and if she accidentally gets hurt, it would be a massive loss for the nation, so they told me to look after your disciple." Ivan mentally scrambled. "That's the exact job Elizaveta gave me. She knows full well how the princess operates. Unless she sided with the crown prince, she has to understand what I'm hinting at." And precisely as intended, Enrique understood all those words from her perspective. "You said you're raising a disciple. Bam. I've already grasped her identity, location, and personal info, so they told me to look after your disciple, meaning I'm targeting your disciple." A moment later, Ivan bolted upright, thinking this should be enough for her to understand, while Enrique on the other end slammed the table and sprang to her feet, shouting, "This brat is targeting my disciple." Looking outside, she gave an order, "Lucia, come in." At the call, the door quickly crept open as a voice answered, "Yes, master." Enrique commanded, "Now go say hello. This is your senior brother." And the girl immediately obeyed, saying, "I've heard so much about you." The moment Ivan laid eyes on her, he had to blurt out a question. "Are you even human? Do you know what race your master is?" Lucia responded to him clearly, "Yes, I know my master is human." She further introduced, "Even though my master has to live on a somewhat unique diet, she is a true hero who loves me and protects this country." If you ask me what defines a race, I would answer that it's humanity. Hearing that, Ivan could only let out an "oh." The scene left him somewhat astonished, because ever since the war with the demon race, the kingdom had always maintained a hostile attitude toward non-human races, making the girl's open-minded attitude a rare sight. At that moment, Enrique stood up, speaking with a tone of deep satisfaction. "She is my pride and joy, someone far better than me. No, better than all of us. A precious child I was blessed with in the twilight years of my life. That is why." Enrique stepped forward with a line that sounded almost like she wanted him to trust her. "I don't want to kill you, Ivan." Ivan also slowly picked up his weapon and stood up, knowing that everything ultimately had to lead to this. Pointing his weapon right at her with a cold voice, he demanded, "If you're still shaking hands with the royal family, then I'll use the memories between us to ask you one thing. Where does your loyalty lie?" Ivan threw out the sharp question. What price did Alexander pay, people, blood, or territory? This remark took Enrique by surprise as she countered. "Huh, weren't you the one shaking hands with Alexander?" Hearing that, Ivan was stunned. "What on earth are you talking about? I've never once met that man with a smile on my face." Both came to a halt, the fighting spirit that had just been ignited fading away. Enrique pressed her hands down on the table, as the room fell into a silence, so profound you could hear a pin drop. She sat back down in her chair and complained with a sigh, "This really drains all my energy. Every time we talk, it's always like this. Why is the world so fair? If only you'd grant me a bit more eloquence." While Ivan didn't know how to reply, thinking, "It's not like that." Lucia didn't understand what was going on, but chimed in cheerfully, "I think you two look really good together," prompting Enrique to snap back. "What on earth are you talking about?" Ivan let out a sigh of relief and finally picked up his coffee cup, thinking, "With this level of stress, it's enough to make me want to ask Princess Elizaveta for overtime pay." Taking a quiet sip of his coffee, he confirmed to himself, "Anyway, the problem's been resolved." Even when the tutorial phase began, Enrique's disciple wouldn't fall into any major danger because Enrique herself would protect the girl. The future student of St. Jansky University, Lucia, teased Enrique at that moment. "Master's murderous intent is no joke, as expected of a former assassin from the hero's party," to which Enrique brushed it off vaguely. "Whatever." Meanwhile, Ivan kept watching them and her master. He remarked that they looked more like mother and daughter than master and disciple, meaning the parent-teacher conference had concluded smoothly without a single hitch. At that point, Enrique grew a bit curious and asked, "By the way, Ivan, why on earth did you go teach ambush techniques to those orphans?" To which Ivan immediately explained, "I never taught them that. They were just struggling every possible way to find jobs after graduating," making Enrique realize, "Ah, right, they learned it on their own." With that conversation concluded, he had walked a fairly long distance with Priscilla afterward, meaning this place was quite far from the orphanage. From the very beginning, why on earth did Priscilla bother coming all this way just to end up right in the crosshairs of Enrique's subordinates? As they walked, Priscilla softly called out to him, "Director." Looking timid with her eyelashes damp with tears, she asked, "Is it possible? I mean, truly just possibly, are you getting ready to go away somewhere?" Her question led Ivan to deduce, "A government agent came to see me after I spent 2 full years staying exclusively at the orphanage, and lately I've also been frequently absent from the orphanage. Is that why she thinks I'm about to leave? No, it probably isn't because of something like that. It's likely just because the kids have seen right through my deepest thoughts." Finished with his thoughts, Ivan gave a subtle nod. He gave Priscilla an answer, "I suppose I will be leaving." The sobbing beside him erupted the moment Ivan finished speaking. "Huh." As Priscilla couldn't hold back her tears and wailed, "Don't go. I wish you wouldn't go. I mean, if the director disappears, we'll be left all alone again." Hearing her heartfelt words, Ivan understood. So that's how it is. This war orphan must have thought her home was about to vanish. Everything finally became clear. That was why the girl had rushed out to the city center to look for a job. And because she walked without making a sound, she got mistaken for a professionally trained agent. Too bad it turned out like this, Ivan thought as he draped his coat over her shoulders, prompting Priscilla to ask anxiously, "Where are you going?" Ivan stayed silent without answering, but the answer was already clear in his heart. "I definitely want to leave this otherworldly realm." However, a moment later he replied, "I am naming a location. Going to St. Jansky University. Don't worry, I'll come back to visit the school often." Hearing that reply, Priscilla stopped crying, looking up at him with a faint smile as she thought, "It's not like I can go right this second anyway, but I don't necessarily have to do it right now either. I've poured way too much heart and soul into this place." Back at the orphanage, Ivan's voice announced, So it looks like it'll take about 3 years for me to completely return. Elsewhere, a small hand slammed down on a desk. St. Jansky University. I heard the entrance exam is super hard, and next year's entrance exam is this coming November, so Priscilla declared with confidence. That means if we go there, we can meet him again in just one more year. The rules of the game remain the same as before. Don't let the director find out, and don't get caught. Their objective this time was that whoever got accepted into the school first would win. And just like that, all the children of St. Vasilisa Orphanage entered cram school mode to pass the exam for St. Jansky University. Reading through some documents, Ivan remarked that everything was progressing smoothly. Esidice, the berserker of the hero's party and daughter of King Einar, Lucia, Enrique's disciple, and the vampire assassin of the hero's party. Ivan's gaze suddenly turned serious, and right on the tracks was a train. A sword stood upright. The next person Ivan turned his attention to was Isabel, the hero's daughter. Night blanketed the forest, housing a cabin within, as the hero's party was essentially an assassination squad, because they had to infiltrate deep into enemy territory to target the leaders of the Demon King's army, requiring them to be extremely silent. Maximilian observed his handiwork and broke into a satisfied smile, though he didn't get to feel proud for long before someone chucked a piece of wood right at his head with a painful thud, accompanied by a scolding. "You're out of your mind." Enrique marched forward complaining, "Why don't you just walk around and scream at the top of your lungs instead? Scream that the hope of the Allied Kingdom is right here," while a voice chimed in from behind her. "All right." Enrique quickly spun around to observe what the other person was doing. Gilles Vert drew his sword and slashed a circle around himself, competing as he stated, "I can't lose." A few more cracks appeared across the sky, prompting Enrique to yell angrily, "You two are truly unbelievable." Finished with his display, Gilles Vert coolly slicked back his hair and looked satisfied. "Seems like I slashed more this time. A good warm-up, right?" To which Enrique reminded him, "Your wrist is broken, you know." Gilles Vert casually held out his broken hand toward the person nearby. "Patricia, heal me," leaving her unhappy with his attitude as she retorted, "I find that phrasing rather insulting." At that moment, one of them suddenly burst out laughing in amusement. Einar was eager to show off his skills, declaring, "A true man of drone lives to leave his mark on the world," while the guys in the back saw the commotion and tried to stop him. "I really wish you wouldn't do that. Don't," as Einar had already locked onto the mountain ahead as his target. A single strike from him split the mountain wide open in no time, and thanks to that, they swarmed out afterward like bees from a shattered hive. We had an extremely hard time escaping from the Iron Dragon General and the Demon King's army. I still remember that ridiculous escape like it was yesterday. Up in the sky, those cracks from earlier were still there. The hero, Maximilian, scratched the back of his head with one hand while pointing up at the sky with the other, saying, "I split the sky in half." And that was just the kind of person Maximilian was. Gilles Vert chimed in to compete to the end. "I slashed more," while Einar added, "I chopped a whole mountain in half." He continued, "That's right. Instead of slashing something formless and intangible, isn't slashing something tangible an even greater miracle?" Prompting Enrique to warn them, "Rambling on with grandiose words isn't going to make you any smarter." The hero's party was a nest of lunatics, as Enrique grabbed Einar by the scruff of his neck while Einar flailed wildly despite her yelling, "I'm gonna die," leading Ivan to assess Maximilian as the craziest of the lot, yet also the one who shone the brightest. He looked over at Ivan sitting in a corner back then, thinking, "You, the hero, dared to risk splitting the midnight sky in half for no particular reason, only to say he did it just because he wanted to look at the stars. I really don't like that hero. For some unknown reason, that man defeated the Demon King 4 years ago and suddenly vanished, cutting off all contact with the world. Even so, the world still remembered the hero, but they were forgetting the man named Maximilian." Right now inside the train carriage, the person sitting opposite noticed him deep in thought and spoke up. "Lord Ivan, is something bothering you?" Prompting Ivan to quietly reply, "You know," before turning his attention to everyone sitting in the carriage. "All of you." Ivan let out a sigh as he recalled what happened back then, when a troublesome situation arose. "The day I returned after stopping the terrorist attack," a voice filled with surprise echoed from within. "A terrorist attack actually happened. How on earth did you know in advance?" Dmitri was astonished by Ivan's ability, and you even pinpointed the exact date, time, and location. He walked over, grabbed Ivan by the arms, and pleaded, "Next time you go out, we'll send agents from the Counterintelligence Command to assist you. Would about 5 people be enough?" Which happened because I made them suspicious. Dmitri silently begged in his heart, "Tell me, I'm asking out of genuine curiosity, How on earth did you set up an intelligence network without us knowing anything about it? Which to Ivan was fairly simple. It was a natural reaction, considering that he, a man retired for 4 years, had predicted a terrorist attack targeting the nation's key figures. He didn't need anything too complicated. He simply predicted it based on familiar tropes. But to that guy, it probably looked like he had a transnational secret intelligence organization backing him up. Meaning if he didn't provide a reasonable explanation, it would lead to a dozen annoying troubles in the future. But consequently, there was no need to reveal the truth, because authority inherently stems from mystery. However, the result was, Ivan gritted his teeth in anger. The result is that I ended up getting support from 5 clumsy agents who are definitely here to spy on me. As he growled out, "Listen up." But Ivan wondered from the start, why on earth do intelligence agents wear identical outfits like this? As he grew impatient, "I can't take this anymore." Ivan continued chewing them out. "And while there are plenty of empty seats, you guys clustered so close together that anyone could tell you're suspicious." He criticized them. "How am I supposed to enjoy my retirement in peace when people calling themselves agents are this sloppy?" The more he lectured the rookies, the higher Ivan's anger climbed. "Let me tell you, back when I was your age." Thus a story began inside the train carriage. After countless long, dragging hours, the train finally showed signs of slowing down. The moment they got off, they lined up neatly, reporting, "Then, per your instructions, we'll take our leave now, Lord Ivan." Ivan felt he hadn't lectured them long enough, so he kept up his commanding tone to find fault. "You're still using the word we. Express yourselves clearly, act decisively, and always keep your true intentions buried in the deepest place." Back when I was in the extermination squad, while the agents smiled on the outside but screamed on the inside, Lieutenant Colonel Dmitri, I heard this uncle was extremely quiet. In what universe is this considered quiet, for crying out loud? He's a monster. He's been talking non-stop for 18 hours straight without resting for even a single second. Catching the final cue, the bunch of them bolted away on all fours, leaving Ivan to finally feel at ease, thinking. They finally retreated. Ivan deduced Dmitri probably told them to spy on him, but thinking back, yesterday he had to play the role of a terrifying kindergarten teacher. And along with teaching them a lesson they'd never forget, he also gave them an excuse to leave this place. Ivan recalled the instructions he was given beforehand. "All of you, protect Oscar, the knight's son." He turned around and muttered to himself admiringly. "I managed to shake off my surveillance while also protecting a member of the hero's party. It feels like killing 2 birds with 1 stone." Ivan quickly shifted his attention to a blonde girl stepping onto the train, seemingly recognizing her face. Inside the carriage, Isabel was gazing out the window. At that moment, someone walked up and placed a hand on her shoulder. "My lady, please don't worry, he'll always." Before he could finish, Isabel shoved his hand away from her body. She glared at him with sharp eyes. "Shut up, you stupid good-for-nothing." He maintained his respectful demeanor. "My lady, While Isabel cut him off again. "Get lost. I don't even want to look at your face anymore." As he walked away, Isabel still hurled insults after him, calling him a fool. The person stepped outside and gently pulled the door shut. He couldn't take it anymore, his face twisting as he gritted his teeth in pure anger. This train had departed from St. Madeleine as an express train heading straight toward the capital. Because this region was located close to the front line against the demon hordes, most of the areas it passed through were heavily guarded military zones. Out of the 30 stations, only 3 carried a high probability of terrorist attacks. The first stop served as a suitable location for an ambush, but the second stop was an ideal spot for a raid. Yet absolutely nothing happened. And now came the final stop. Some passengers on the train had already dozed off to catch some rest. The entire carriage sank into a heavy silence amid the pitch-black night. Ivan felt a hint of shock, wondering what was going on and if his prediction had been wrong, questioning whether the newbie tutorial section was supposed to default to a train terrorist attack. So was Esidisi's incident just a random anomaly? No way. The initial design elements of a school-themed story were always standardized. Ivan considered another possibility, wondering if this wasn't a school story after all, thinking, damn it, would this damn alternate world ever actually end? People scrambled out of the train in complete panic as a bearded guy angrily pointed a handgun at them, shouting about terrorists and a terrorist attack at the final stop. Ivan asked himself what would happen if that ending was meant exclusively for the main character, or if the hero hadn't gone into hiding at all, but had instead returned to his own world after seeing the ending. A question popped into his head. What would happen to the other world left behind in his wake? He looked at Kim Sunwoo's reflection in the glass, wondering, What about me? The train sped onward, toward its final stop along the route. Ivan frantically denied the thought, refusing it and declaring he hated this, vowing he didn't want to stay in this damn world a single second longer. His mind spiraled further into panic as he wanted to let go of everything, wishing to let go, wanting to let go, wanting to leave, wanting to depart, wanting to lie down on a cozy bed inside a warm house with a well-functioning fireplace, wrapping himself in a warm blanket amidst a world of games, novels, movies, and TV shows, and sleeping straight through an entire week, terrified of dying and wanting to live no matter what, determined at all costs to return to where he used to live. Swearing he had to make it happen because he couldn't take it anymore, wondering what he should do now with those gears and affirmations, and wishing he could just talk to people who spoke Korean about games and entertainment programs. Kim Sun-woo's reflection screamed wildly in the mirror, trapped far away from where the concepts of welfare and entertainment were practically non-existent, stuck inside this damn pre-modern fantasy world. Kim Sun-woo gripped his own throat with his hands, desperate to get out of here. Ivan stared with his eyes wide in absolute astonishment. The glass pane right in front of him fractured into massive, jagged pieces. Right at that moment, an explosion tore through the area. The glass right in front of Ivan shattered and scattered everywhere in fragments. The train carriages derailed one after another. The train and the panicking figure of Kim Sun-woo vanished. Isabel was rocked by the explosion, losing her balance and tumbling down. Ivan assessed his own physical condition and braced himself to do what Ivan Petrovich had to do, noting how his head, heart, and fingertips had all turned ice cold. He compared the sensation to the harsh winter of Krasilov, just like that endless dark night, cold, silent, and meticulous. Ivan grew certain of one thing: the tutorial compliance section wasn't over yet, meaning his guess hadn't been wrong. He calmly stepped out of the utterly blown to smithereens train carriage. Hope flared up in Ivan's mind once more, though the ending still loomed ahead. Not long after, the train was reduced to nothing more than a pile of wreckage. Dust billowed thickly through the ruined carriages. Isabel stirred at that moment, letting out a soft groan of pain. Isabel fluttered her eyes open with difficulty, wondering what on earth had happened. Water droplets trickled down onto her face as a voice asked if she was awake yet, milady. The man lifted his face to look straight up, leaving Isabel stunned. Someone was holding back the heavy debris on his back to protect her, and as the wreckage caved in further, he groaned in pain and called out to her as milady. She remembered this person. He was the very guy she had chased away earlier. Isabel wondered why he was. The man hurriedly urged her to run, telling her that her life was their target, while Isabel stubbornly refused to let someone else sacrifice themselves for her, telling him to leave her behind and flee. She let out a cold laugh, asking if he was actually an idiot and why he would save someone like her, admitting she knew he must hate her guts. Isabel brought up the most likely possibility at the moment, asking if he did it just because he thought her father would fly into a rage if she died, before dismissing it herself by saying he didn't understand since that man didn't care about anyone at all. But he seemed to be doing it for a different reason, which she recognized. The man continued expressing his true feelings, explaining that he had never cared whether that man worried or not, simply because she was the hero's daughter and she was the last remaining hope, carried by the man known as Maximilian. Isabel couldn't believe what she was hearing, asking what on earth he was talking about. At that moment, a voice chimed in with admiration. Ivan walked over and hoisted the heavy debris pressing down on the man's back. Ivan asked the knight for his name, and the man managed to choke out his identity: Diane August. When asked in return, Ivan didn't hesitate to give his name: Ivan Petrovich. Ivan asked if he wanted to live, prompting Diane August to pant heavily and answer that if it was possible. Hearing the response, Ivan popped the cap off a bottle of medicine, warning him that it was going to hurt badly. With sheer iron willpower, Knight Diane August pushed through the agony of the recovery potion, a method Isabel noted down in her mind just like that. As Ivan poured the medicine onto his wounds, Diane August let out a blood-curdling scream, begging to be killed and offering to spill everything about the Knight Order's accounting books, prompting an unbearable Isabel to snap at him and ask if he had lost his mind. Diane August turned to Isabel and shouted her name, wishing she hadn't been born the hero's daughter, only for her to mercilessly slap him across the face and call him a fool. Diane August passed out cold without rambling any further, managing to squeeze out just one last word: mother. Assessing the situation, Ivan concluded that the shock had triggered a mental regression in him, telling Isabel that since it was her fault for hitting him, she needed to reflect on her own actions. With that, he looked off into the distance, noting that the people who had ambushed them along the path were arriving, meaning they needed to prepare, and telling her to carry the knight on her back while he handled the fight. Isabel drew her sword and assumed a fighting stance, declaring that she could fight too. Her sword-holding hand trembled in waves. Ivan let out a sigh, remarking that her aptitude wasn't bad. But it wasn't necessary, which deeply offended Isabel as she demanded to know if he even knew her, asking when they had ever agreed to drop formal honorifics, old man. Ivan brushed it off, turning away to remark that she seemed to have inherited her mother's personality rather than her father's, prompting a surprised Isabel to ask if he knew her father, to which Ivan simply replied. Without answering her, he issued orders to the surrounding survivors to gather together, start a fire, and tear up the train seats to use as blankets, warning that winter nights in this region were much harsher than she thought, though Isabel doubted it, asking what they would do about the ambush if they lit a fire. Ivan didn't bother explaining further, telling her that wasn't something she needed to worry about, leading Isabel to guess that he was planning to go alone and asking if he didn't even know who the enemy was. Ivan replied in a flat tone, saying that wasn't something she needed to worry about either. Ivan looked up at the full moon high in the sky, recalling a saying from tactical doctrine: choose the least harmful option and execute the most optimal action. He used to look down on it as a statement so obvious it made him laugh. But actual combat was where you truly grasped its real meaning. Assuming the worst-case scenario and executing the optimal action meant knowing the enemy would always try to attack in the hardest way to deal with. When a train derailed, the enemy would naturally assume the survivors would run away. And in that case, the enemy would pursue them because from the target's perspective, the absolute worst-case scenario was getting ambushed by pursuers while fleeing. This raised a major question. What was the countermeasure? It was placing the target right in the most conspicuous position possible for the enemy. Ivan quickly analyzed the situation, concluding that the enemy would now regroup the forces they had scattered for the pursuit, because they would be forced to switch tactics from chasing to encircling. They would organize an attack and surround the target, so he would execute the most optimal action in response. Based on that logic, assuming the worst-case scenario, and taking the optimal action meant that if the worst possible opponent existed for him, it meant he had to naturally become a similarly terrifying existence to the enemy. In short, embracing the exact kind of attack he least wanted to face: handgun sniping. The shooting technique was designed so that extermination squad operatives could launch long-range attacks using nothing more than handguns and throw them back at opponents. The thugs quickly took direct hits from Ivan's bullets. They began frantically searching for the source of the gunfire, screaming in panic that Inov was down, demanding to know where the shooter was and telling them to step out. Ivan's plan officially kicked off as the enemy organized their assault to encircle the target. In a dark forest like this, a lit torch inherently served as a brilliant target marker. The thugs were taken down one by one until they spotted a flying weapon being thrown at them: an axe. One of them lunged toward the direction the axe was hurled from, screaming for it to die. Another guy was split right down the middle. Ivan picked off each enemy one by one without any hesitation. The motion of retrieving his axe and sliding it back into his holster was swift and clean. Letting out a breath after wiping out that bunch, he noted that a surprise raid by the extermination squad allowed a single individual to completely surround an entire group. Holding their torches, the remaining thugs scanned every direction with extreme vigilance. One of them hurried over to report to the leader that they had been hit again, informing him that all 3 victims had reportedly been slashed by an axe, causing the leader to let out a cold snort as he muttered that he had sent troops straight toward the gunshot sounds. Yet, pondering for a moment, he noted that since they were easily subduing the pursuit team he sent out, they might be an elite, small-scale commando unit, revealing himself as Ifellos, a centurion under the 6th Iron Dragon General's Guards Infantry Division. He listened closely in silence, using his ears to pinpoint the targets from the west and north. Ifellos accurately tracked the positions, noting that the gunfire was slowly closing in around this location, wondering if they knew where they were and thinking it couldn't be. He ordered a subordinate to hand over their gun. Ifellos fired a shot into the sky before making a swift, confident assertion that there was only one enemy. Someone voiced a skeptical denial, saying it was impossible because multiple gunshots had clearly come from different directions, prompting Ifellos to ask if they still didn't get it. Right at that moment, several strings suddenly appeared. They were hooked onto a boot. Ifellos loudly explained that it was a trap, angrily roaring that those were simply the sounds of their own gunfire echoing back. Hearing a commotion behind him, a subordinate spun around. An axe blade came flashing forward and slashed straight across his neck. Ifellos continued explaining to his remaining subordinates, pointing out that the first shot was just fired to test whether he had bullet trajectory perception, nodding that they had reacted too quickly by sending the pursuit team right where the bastard wanted, meaning those gunshots were meant as a decoy from the very beginning. A nearby subordinate hesitantly wondered if the hero's daughter could really orchestrate all of this by herself, asking who on earth could pull off such a feat alone, to which I Fellows repeated her title, the hero's daughter. He recalled the past, remembering the absurd martial arts prowess and stating she would still be a monster even with just half of his strength. Finishing his thought, I Fellows ordered everyone to gather up and mobilize the entire force to hunt down that bastard, receiving a crisp acknowledgement from his subordinate. He added that he would move independently, leaving his subordinate slightly surprised as he stammered out a confused response. Torches flickered faintly against the night sky. The lucky survivors from the train carriage huddled around a campfire, crying that they were all going to die and screaming in terror for their mothers. Isabel looked at Diane August with worry, begging him to wake up as he remained in a dazed, out-of-it state, mumbling about glowing fireflies. But at that moment, an event unfolded that caused Isabel's pupils to dilate to their absolute limit. A smug laugh rang out from behind them. Strutting forward, I Fellows proudly introduced himself as a centurion of the 6th Iron Dragon General's Guards Infantry Division. Locking his sights onto Isabel, he declared he would personally deal with the hero's daughter. The night grew darker as the full moon climbed higher. Wearily sitting under the trunk of a large tree, Ivan tried recalculating the enemy numbers, noting that excluding the commander who possessed bullet trajectory perception, there were a total of 50 deployed soldiers. Blood continued to drip in droplets from his axe blade. Raising his head to look at the scattered corpses sprawled out before him, he muttered that he had practically got the hang of most of it. He then expertly strapped his axe back onto his waist, leaning against a massive tree trunk as he walked past the corpses littering the ground. He felt even more confused, wondering if this really was a school story. With his serious gaze fixed straight ahead unchanged, he figured that since the main characters were enrolling right now, this definitely had to be the tutorial phase, but the difficulty of this tutorial was way too high. Recalling fragments of Essidy's gameplay and dismissing them, he thought Essidy's tutorial was so easy he could beat it with one hand, since the enemies were a bunch of weaklings who didn't even know how to use bullet trajectory perception to seize the enrollment train. But then Ivan's super memory brought up the events tied to Isabel in the game, realizing that simply escaping a train buried under a landslide was already a massive hurdle, even if the original game provided some kind of puzzle to help you break out. His mind pictured it all as mandatory combat game graphics, followed by an unidentified elite squad launching a sudden attack without even bothering to explain the combat system. He then contemplated the worst-case scenario awaiting her against Ifellows, especially since the boss turned out to be a formidable enemy capable of using bullet trajectory perception. Walking step by step through the woods while thinking as thoroughly as possible, he recalled that some games featured tutorial bosses you were forced to lose to, but these guys were genuinely trying to kill Isabel. Suddenly, his footsteps halted on the ground, thinking unless a supporting NPC showed up to save her. Wait, no way. Ivan's blue eyes widened in sheer disbelief as he whispered, "Am I that supporting NPC?" With a powerful burst, he shot forward like a bullet, thinking that if he truly was nothing more than an NPC, the kind of character who didn't even show up in the ending credits. He leaped effortlessly up into the towering tree trunk, wondering if that meant he would never get an ending, and whether it implied he could never return to the real world. Clutching his face in momentary despair, he rested his hand against the tree and weighed two main issues. First, why was the tutorial difficulty this chaotic? And second, would Isabel actually die if a supporting NPC wasn't there? After a moment, Ivan relied on his gaming and novel-reading experience to arrive at a conclusion, realizing there was only one way to find out. Standing atop the windy tree, he gazed toward the orange glow flickering in the distance. Isabel stood gripping her sword in confrontation against Ifellows, who mocked her disbelief, stepping forward to boast that he had prepared extremely thoroughly since she was the hero's daughter. Ifellows sneered as he watched her standing before him, taunting her for being way too weak. Even so, Isabel clutched her sword tightly, staring at him with exhausted fury, bracing herself even as she faced death. Ivan looked down from the tree with a cold, resolute expression, reminding himself that he wouldn't interfere either. She lunged forward once more to clash with Ifellows, but he easily blocked her strike using just one hand on his blade. Ifellows parried her blows while chatting casually, remarking that he often saw people like her who thought attacking faster and smoother was all it took just because they memorized the training manual. But he immediately shot the idea down, telling her she was wrong, which only infuriated her further as she screamed at him to shut up. Ifelos's words left the civilians hiding behind them pale with anxious dread, as he noted she was the hero's daughter, adding that a slash was meaningless if it failed to hit the opponent, marveling at how big the hero's daughter had grown. Ifelos showed no mercy, delivering a horizontal slash right across Isabel's face that made her wince as she raised her sword to block the blow. His gaze and voice were filled with utter contempt as he looked down at Isabel, remarking how pathetic it was that the hero's daughter had grown this big without ever experiencing real combat. Her inner rage was provoked, driving her to charge back into the fight with even more fury as she shouted at him to shut up. But the very next second, Isabel's familiar longsword was forcefully swatted away. The sword plunged straight into the ground a good distance away from both Ifelos and her. With his sharp blade now pointed straight at Isabel's chest, he muttered that he had lost good soldiers for nothing, and that this whole thing should have ended much sooner. Fellows kept his sword aimed at her, his low voice dripping with menace as he declared that unlike the hero, she couldn't protect anyone, asking the hero's daughter if she had any last words. A look of profound sorrow crossed Isabel's face as she mentally repeated that single word, the hero. Suddenly, a voice echoed from behind, making her turn back in surprise as it told her not to try and become a hero. From a distance, the figure and voice of Diane August became increasingly clear, as he stated that we call him a hero not because he was the strongest, but because he was the bravest, causing her to recognize him in sheer astonishment as Lord Diane August. Diane August's eyes stared fixedly at the ground, speaking with almost no hope as he said that we must never become heroes, recalling the knight's oath he had sworn on the battlefield over 10 years ago. We aren't even allowed to try, because we must always remain acutely aware of our own weaknesses. As he knelt in the solemn palace with his gaze glued to the tiled floor, the memory replayed of how they were forbidden from trying to be heroes, standing before the king who held a sword with both hands and solemnly recited the oath, words that remained deeply etched in his heart, even after losing his mind. That symbolic sword lightly touched Diane August's chest as if to firmly seal the oath, to stand by the weak and view people like them through the lens of the weak, fulfilling the knight's oath of the kingdom of Thils. It was then that she finally realized it and bravely spoke up, declaring that she would do just that, having finally recognized through acceptance just how weak she truly was. Losing his patience, Ifelos swung his blade straight at Isabel, telling her that if she had no last words, she should just die. But she managed to drop and roll flat against the ground to dodge the fatal strike, remembering that they must acknowledge their own weakness, and that the only reason they swing their swords is because it is the right thing to do. Isabel sprang back up without fear, lunging for her sword to retrieve it, driven by the conviction that they do it because a greater cause must be protected. That reckless moment of hers also terrified the vulnerable civilians she was protecting behind her. But she knew it was no different from giving charity to the poor or helping a wounded person stand up, simply because it was the right thing to do and because it was justice. Enraged that she refused to go down, he swung his blade harder, shouting for the knights of Thils to listen. But right at that moment, Isabel managed to grab the hilt of her sword, telling him that he didn't stand there for courage, but for humility. She quickly parried another dangerous strike just in time. Isabel's hands trembled slightly from the heavy impact and sheer exhaustion, reminding herself that doing good has always been a simple and natural thing. Her entire body suddenly began to gleam amidst her fiery anger as she declared that in the name of justice, she draws her sword. In the blink of an eye, Isabel swiftly overwhelmed Ifelos. He was beaten back by her overwhelming strength, barely managing to block her onslaught. Realizing his end was near, Ifelos felt a wave of bitter disbelief, gasping in shock that this couldn't be happening. With an expression fueled by pure courage, Isabel clutched her sword and charged right at him. Their metal blades clashed violently, sending a piercing screech ringing through the air. But the very next second, Isabel successfully drove her sword straight into Ifelos' body. His blood immediately began to stream from the wound down onto the ground. His body slowly sank to the earth as Ifelos clutched his injury, grumbling in bitter resentment that after having to deal with her heroic father, he was now being stabbed by the hero's own daughter. A moment later, overwhelmed by the severity of his wounds, he collapsed. A cold, warning voice came from Isabel, as she stated clearly that she was not the hero's daughter. Her turquoise eyes looked down as she corrected him, proclaiming that she was Isabel, the daughter of Maximilian. Gathering what little breath he had left, Ifellos rasped out that he understood. Exhausted, Isabel let out a long sigh of relief and slumped down onto the ground, muttering that she was completely spent. She used her sword to prop herself up from collapsing entirely, but the surrounding civilians watched the scene unfold with overwhelming joy, realizing all the survivors had made it out safely as they cheered that they had made it and survived, thanking the heavens. Immediately after, a voice echoed from behind offering praise for a job well done. She watched Ivan walk over, his body smeared with blood, and asked him with lingering curiosity about the rest of the enemies. Hearing that, he simply replied that this guy was the last one. Hearing his answer, Isabel let out another sigh of relief and sat heavily on the ground, marveling at how incredible that truly was, though Ivan remained nonchalant, remarking that who could really say. Watching her sitting on the ground, his expression softened as he figured out that this terrorist attack was probably just the standard awakening event, the kind meant for the tutorial phase. A tragic, shattered scene flashed through his mind, realizing that according to the usual cliché tropes, all the survivors, including Lord Diane August, should have been completely wiped out here. From that, Ivan could easily deduce the original progression for Isabel, where she would have awakened in despair and wiped out every single enemy in this forest. But now, looking at the cheerful, smiling faces of the people gathered around the campfire, he knew they survived solely because he had interfered, something entirely impossible for a normal NPC. A sense of relief washed over Ivan's heart as he looked straight up at the sky and thought how glad he was that he wasn't an NPC. Memories flashed through his mind in a brilliant, sparkling sequence as he suddenly recalled that day, the day when the first hero cleaved the sky in two. Later on, they used to lie together on the ground gazing at the sparkling night sky, knowing that what the hero wanted to see on that day wasn't just the stars. Ivan's eyes never left the largest, brightest star twinkling in the night sky, hidden behind the thick clouds blanketing the Demon King's territory, wanting to make sure the morning star was still shining in its rightful place. Yet a moment later, he let out a sigh and glanced back briefly, admitting to himself that he had never really liked that hero. But then Ivan remembered Maximilian's smiling face from that very night. Even now, looking back at Isabel resting tiredly yet contentedly on the ground, he realized the morning star was still shining right there where it belonged, and all he could do was admire it. Seeing Ivan looking like he intended to leave, she sat up and declared that now that her mind was made up, she would remind herself of her original goal, ensuring that all the daughters of the hero's party graduated safely. Ivan slowly rummaged inside his coat without a word of explanation, knowing that to achieve that goal, there was still so much he needed to figure out, such as how demons were able to roam so freely near the capital like this. He calmly pulled a green potion from his coat, wondering just who was leading them and how many had already infiltrated the academy. That sight horrified Isabel, who stared in shock and asked him what on earth he was doing. The eerie green glow from the glass vial made Ivan look even more dangerous and mystical, as he remarked that the eradication squad had plenty of ways to treat injuries, mostly to satisfy that kind of curiosity. As the greenish liquid poured continuously over Ifellos' body, the demon thrashed in agony, screaming curses about how sparing his life wouldn't make him betray his kind, calling them damned, filthy humans. He writhed and screamed through his pain, defying them to try and torture him, proudly declaring himself Centurion Ifellos of the 6th Iron Dragon General's Vanguard Infantry Division. Shooting Ivan a vicious, hate-filled glare, he told him to remember his face because he would never forget it, not even in hell. His long, pointed tongue lolled out past his teeth. Keeping his composure entirely, Ivan calmly replied that the guy really was just a disposable frontline pawn, finding it unbelievable that anyone still believed in those ancient legends. Touching Ifellos' dust-covered face with his grime-stained hand, he noted that biting his tongue wouldn't kill him since the human body wasn't that fragile. Otherwise, people would just drop dead from choking on dinner every single night. Without hesitation, Ivan forced the demon's mouth open and poured the liquid in, explaining that since he couldn't move from the start, the only way he'd die of shock was a heart attack. So doing that would only drag out his suffering, adding that he wasn't here to torture him. Staring down with cold, emotionless eyes, he told the Centurion that this was just first aid, and that was a recovery potion. Suddenly, a strange voice interrupted, catching Ivan off guard as the poisoned spider Petrovich spoke up. Though hanging on by a thread in a state of suspended animation, he managed to gasp out that he heard the guy was dead, recognizing the eradication squad's methods and realizing what was happening, which startled Ivan internally as he wondered if this guy had served on the front line during the war. Driven by curiosity, Ivan pressed him seriously, asking why someone of his caliber was personally interfering here, nodding that someone with his abilities shouldn't be treated as a disposable tool easily thrown away. While I fellows could only struggle to answer through his rigid jaw that it was because they couldn't afford another failure, causing Ivan's pupils to constrict in shock at the mention of another failure. Suddenly understanding why someone this strong had been assigned as Isabel's tutorial boss. Vague, amber-tinted memories resurfaced in his mind as he deduced that because he had derailed their previous operation, the demons had dispatched an officer-tier powerhouse to ensure failure wouldn't happen again. His own agility and weapons had wiped out the rest, but it raised the question of why they would send a centurion, the lowest rank among officers. A bitter realization made Ivan lower his head, figuring out that there wouldn't likely be any other major terrorist attacks after this since the mission had failed, making him face the harsh truth that this whole incident was just carried out by a small rogue faction of extremists. Sitting down beside Ifellos' battered body, he gave a blunt assessment that the masterminds would feed their allies a scripted story and throw him away, to which Ifellos surprisingly reacted with indifferent resignation, saying he knew as much. Clenching the weapon in his palm tightly, Ivan reasoned that it made sense. Whether he succeeded or failed from the start, he was just a disposable weapon meant to be thrown away and never reclaimed, much like Ivan's tall silhouette towering over him with a blade placed even greater pressure on Ifellos as he muttered the words, "The Eradication Squad." Grabbing the demon by the horns and hoisting him up with a hint of leniency, Ivan laid out his three choices. The first was to remain captive, be dragged back to Prison Kaya under heavy armed guard, and die a slow death under brutal torture and magical seals by the counterintelligence forces. In his steady, even tone, Ivan explained the second choice. Being released right here to return home, though counterintelligence would tail him wherever he went, and his own kind would brand him a traitor who sold them out to save his own skin. Pausing mid-sentence, he brought the blade closer to Ifellos' neck as he prepared to deliver the third option. Flinching slightly at the razor-sharp edge pressed against his throat, Ifellos finally forced himself to speak. Clenching his teeth, he recited a bitter command through gritted teeth, quoting the dark prayer about walking through the valley of the shadow of death and fearing no evil because he is with them. He proclaimed himself the polar star in the darkest night and the beacon in the stormy sea, telling Ivan to stop wasting time and just kill him. Recognizing the chant in an even voice, Ivan realized it was a prayer dedicated to the Demon King. The next second, Ivan casually shifted topics and asked if his parents were still alive, leaving the demon blinking in utter bewilderment as he stammered out a confused, "What?" Staring at him in disbelief, the demon demanded to know what the hell he was talking about, to which Ivan simply replied with total composure that he ran an orphanage. To go and eliminate the 7 dragon generals. Ivan solemnly recalled that directive like a mission as he walked alone toward the sun, leaving behind the scattered corpses of the battlefield, remembering how 4 years ago, when the Eradication Squad received that order, all 8 assault teams were completely wiped out except for a single one. Elizavetta's tears fell onto the paperwork on her desk as she recalled what she told him when he returned safely. With a heartbroken expression, she bowed her head to sign the papers, urging him to live out the rest of his quiet life far away from everyone's eyes and to act as if she were dead, apologizing for failing to stop that order and expressing her sheer gratitude that he survived. Looking down at Ifellos with the blade still at his throat, Ivan explained that if he had even the slightest desire to live, he could shed his past identity and live a forgotten life like a dead man. Stubbornly refusing, Ifellos muttered that he wasn't worthy, but Ivan quickly countered that everyone deserved a second chance, adding that loyalty and faith didn't have to define a person's entire existence. Grabbing the demon's horns while advising him in a deep voice, Ivan offered to snap his horns off if he wished, since those were the final chains binding his body. That threat terrified Ifellos, before Ivan added that if he preferred, he could lower the edge of the axe just a little bit further. Softening his gaze slightly, Ivan delivered his final ultimatum, giving him one last chance to choose whether to live like a human or perish like one. Looking up at Ivan, Ifellos hesitated out of sheer terror. He squeezed his eyes shut, struggling deeply with his thoughts. Finally, trapped between those grim fates, he admitted that he wanted to live. A pleased, quiet note of praise escaped Ivan as he told him it was a wise choice. Followed by the sound of Ifellos' horns being snapped by Ivan, the very next day his registration photo for the orphanage was finalized under the name Ifellos. Status: Orphan. Age: 505. Race: demon. Thoughts of a moving train drifting forward once more crossed his mind, as he concluded that the most plausible hypothesis was that this world operated like an academy story. Shattered ruins and chaos surrounded them, confirming his theory that Isabel, the hero's daughter, had been ambushed. But because of his interference, the tutorial difficulty had skyrocketed through the roof. Medical teams were treating the wounded and handling bodies at the base of the mountain, meaning the demons weren't just pre-programmed entities following a fixed route. They, and everyone else in this world, were far more than mere NPCs. As the evening sky shifted into a brilliant twilight display, he realized that predicting every single event was impossible and obsessing over the exact plot was ultimately meaningless, leaving only one thing he truly needed to focus on. Standing before Ivan and Isabel were two crying children hugging each other tightly, reminding him that his core objective was keeping these kids alive until graduation, even if players, NPCs, and events all veered wildly off course in unexpected directions. As Ivan looked down at her while deep in thought, knowing that singular goal would never change, Isabel softly called out to him, "Uncle." Her voice trembled as she watched a grieving family crying agonizingly over the body of their child, wondering aloud if they and everyone else on that train could have made it back safely if she hadn't boarded it today. Ivan calmly replied that they probably would have, though he left unsaid the fact that they weren't just simple NPCs either. Suddenly continuing his thought, Ivan blurted out, 30,000 people a year, leaving Isabel blinking in confusion as she let out a bewildered huh. The path the hero's party walked was completely deserted and deceptively easy, serving merely to clear the way for their infiltration. Those were the casualty numbers from luring the Demon King's forces into an unwinnable war. An image of Maximilian flashing past the fallen corpses of the dead crossed his mind as a desperate measure to annihilate the 7 dragon generals and the Demon King, meaning 30,000 lives fell beneath the hero's hands every year. A horrific reality known to himself, the soldiers, and everyone else. Despite that heavy burden, a deeply anxious yet warm smile crept onto his face, knowing that the hero always smiled through everything. Reaching out his dried, blood-stained hands while telling her the story, he noted that even when hope was so scarce you had to carve a path through the heavens just to find a single morning star, the hero had to remain the light of hope for everyone, because the moment he fell would spell the absolute end for the allied kingdoms. Pointing straight ahead, Ivan told her to look, causing Isabel to follow his gesture as her eyes sparkled in wonder. He solemnly entrusted her with the responsibility, explaining that it was the star her father carried back then, and now it was the star she had to take over. Looking around in confusion, Isabel turned back to ask which star he meant, since there were so many she could barely tell. But the next second, she let out a gasp of utter astonishment. The largest and brightest star in the night sky shifted its position slightly, reminding her that being a hero meant far more than simply being the strongest. Standing beneath the giant tree gazing up at the starlit sky together, Ivan reminded her that someone who never kneels under any weight and never loses their smile no matter the circumstances is what they truly call a hero. Gently resting his hand on her head as he spoke, he told her that as Maximilian's daughter Isabel, she must hold her head high, stand firm, and rise alongside hope. Looking directly into her green eyes, Ivan gently advised her to live her own life, remembering and cherishing the sacrifices of others instead of being consumed by guilt, proving that their sacrifices weren't in vain, because people pity the gloomy yet admire those who keep a smile on their face. Beaming with pride as he looked down at Isabel under the shining starlight, he likened her to the morning star. Staring up at him, Isabel's cheeks flushed a soft pink. The next moment, she jokingly suggested whether he was thinking of shaving off his beard, only for him to flatly and instantly refuse. Early morning in late February at the grand campus of St. Jansk University, the cheerful chatter of young men and women echoed through the air even in the chilly early spring morning, as freshmen unable to hide their excitement asked each other if they had passed. Standing in stark contrast to the bright newcomers were 2 dazed students weighed down by piles of books, looking like long lines of victims eyed with pity by upperclassmen everywhere you look. Out in the outer courtyard, students of all different races waited solemnly for what seemed like a normal entrance ceremony. Suddenly, the sky above them darkened as they looked up, watching a colossal shadow cast itself over the entire St. Jansk University campus. The sudden appearance caused onlookers to point and murmur in shock, marveling at the flying battleship bearing the unmistakable national crest of Krasila. Dmitri ran at full speed through the frantic panic, shouting that they were doomed. Bursting frantically through the doors into her office, he yelled that they were truly finished because a Krasilov battleship was hovering right over Prizhenkaya. Annoyed by the intrusion, she retorted that she had eyes. Elizaveta's growing madness showed clearly in her deeply displeased expression. While everyone else craned their necks to stare at the sky, Ivan alone felt deeply exasperated, hopping against hope that those people wouldn't just finish off the rest. Reasoning that since Isabel had already been caught up in a derailed train, everyone getting out alive was basically a miracle. Two flying battleships soared across the clear blue sky, prompting the thought that what the elves were doing up there could be summed up in two lines. Your border control is an absolute joke. We protect our own children. And while you'd think nobody would dare pull such a reckless stunt, it was entirely within the realm of possibility. Walking inward alone, wrapped in his own thoughts, he figured Esidice, the daughter of Einar from the hero's party, was probably aboard that airship, before suddenly whipping his head around at a voice calling out to ask if he hadn't said he was an instructor. Dragging her suitcase behind her, Isabel hurried over to Ivan, demanding to know what kind of professor someone with his skills must be, guessing he taught physical education or maybe night studies, though she wondered if St. Jansk University even had an assassination department, ultimately asking if he really was a gym teacher, to which Ivan gave a single glance and recognized that Isabel, the hero's daughter, had arrived. Replying with a terrifyingly serious expression that he was a gardener, Isabel shrieked in absolute disbelief. Amidst the crowd, Esidice stood on guard, observing the scene quietly from a distance. He spotted Lucia standing alone whistling a tune, the disciple of Enrique, who had apparently been in the capital all along. Nearby, a handsome student was drawing the attention of numerous girls as they headed inside, with Ivan keeping up appearances while secretly keeping a close eye on the other key characters. Striding boldly into the campus grounds with Isabel hauling luggage behind him, he noted that all the children of the hero's party had safely arrived at the academy. Observing the situation with sharp, serious eyes, Ivan figured that since the opening ceremony was happening in the main hall, it was about time he prepared for his next steps. A buzzing commotion continued to ripple through the auditorium. In a story about an academy featuring a whole cast of characters from various backgrounds gathered together, unexpected trouble always breaks out during the entrance ceremony, as a matter of course. Meanwhile, a lone young man standing by himself amidst the gathering felt a wave of dizzying confusion, wondering what on earth was happening. His eyes widened continuously as he watched events unfold. Suddenly, a system window popped up congratulating him, sending his mind into a whirl as a status screen appeared. Afterwards, they learned that the infamous trash sword genius of the Northern Grand Duchy had completely transformed the moment he was possessed and received affection. He then stylishly thwarted a terrorist attack at his academy and became famous overnight. His real name was Eugene, but in this story, he was Evgeny Novikov Karamzin. Out of nowhere, another system window flashed in front of Evgeny displaying a new mission and congratulating him on its start. Rank D, prevent the Academy raid. The Academy is under attack by an unknown faction. Prevent the assault in the grand auditorium and department facilities during the entrance ceremony. Objectives: disarm explosives, 03. Optional objectives: eliminate intruders, protect freshmen, 0322. Staring hard at the system window, Evgeny muttered to himself that as they could see, he was a transmigrator. While he was still staring at it, the system window suddenly turned bright red. Another notification popped up right in front of him, stating that the reward had been canceled, leaving Evgeny completely baffled as to why the quest was suddenly canceled. Wondering if choosing the Department of Theology had been a mistake, he thought his plan had been completely foolproof. He had steered a sword genius self like him into theology, because the sharpest blade he had ever held in his life was just a kitchen knife. So how on earth was he supposed to start fighting monsters with a sword? Learning swordsmanship and actually using a sword to kill something were two completely different things. And as someone who had never even cut up a chicken in modern Korea, this was entirely too much for him to handle. That was why he chose theology, since according to the setting his character supposedly had an aptitude for swordsmanship, meaning if things went according to plan, he would acquire swordsmanship, enhancement skills, and healing magic. After that, all he needed to do was safely become ridiculously overpowered. But seeing the status window suddenly issue a quest and instantly cancel it made him curse in frustration over why this was happening. Elsewhere, Ivan was busy dealing with the bombs. At the same time, the first mandatory objective on the mission board was completed. After successfully disarming the explosives, Ivan simply stated, "Disarmed." He then continued to ponder, noting that an attack during the Academy's opening ceremony was practically a given. However, considering the bombers in the sky, and the counterintelligence command on high alert. Attacking the academy right now was tantamount to suicide, yet they were still pushing forward. Ivan carefully reviewed the situation and continued his deduction. They had chosen locations that wouldn't attract the guards' attention, blind spots where they wouldn't be spotted by civilians, and where the explosives couldn't be seen from the windows of surrounding buildings. Having searched for positions meeting all those conditions, he paused for a moment, realizing this was the work of professionals. And tracing their logic in reverse, he figured out that by working backward from their reasoning, he could narrow down the spots where they had planted the bombs. Once he roughly determined their locations, he just needed to walk over and collect them, after which Ivan was seen carrying the bomb containers outside, placing them on the ground, and beginning to bury them underground. While working, he muttered to himself that at this point, it was no different from harvesting young potatoes. And once the explosives were dealt with, Ivan started pondering the masterminds behind it all, realizing the only remaining question was who did it, with the problem being that far too many suspects came to mind. The ones with the strongest motive to terrorize St. Jansk University were the demons, but unless they were completely out of their minds, they wouldn't act like this right after their recent defeat. He continued weighing the possibilities, noting that the elves had a floating warship hovering above St. Jansk University, making them prime candidates to take the blame for a terrorist attack. Yet they stood to gain very little from bombing the academy, possessing the means but lacking the motive. Ivan then thought of the most probable culprit, concluding that the Crown Prince's faction was the most likely candidate, possessing both the means and the motive to attack St. Jansk University. But even for them, today remained an exceptionally difficult day to make a move, because Elizaveta's enraged counterintelligence forces were guarding the entire area. With that thought, Ivan took a deep breath and kept thinking, noting that in a typical Academy genre story, an attack during the opening ceremony was practically mandatory. And for it to truly feel like an Academy genre story, there also had to be secret operatives planted inside the Academy. And while Ivan remained deep in thought, someone suddenly spoke up from behind him. "What is this, a black Santa Claus?" The moment Ivan heard the voice, his astonishing reaction speed instantly kicked in. Without a second of hesitation, he picked up a rock and hurled it directly at the person behind him. However, the mysterious man effortlessly sliced the rock in half with his sword. Then an unexpected situation unfolded, as the impact kicked up dust that filled the air, completely obscuring the mysterious man's figure. And by the time Ivan looked back, the man had vanished from sight. Ivan muttered under his breath about the Santa Claus thing, looking extremely annoyed. There was no Christmas in this world, nor any old man leaving candy, toys, and stockings outside. With that thought, Ivan immediately began searching for the mysterious man, scanning every direction. Meanwhile, the man rapidly cleared the area at a terrifying speed, muttering to himself that it was definitely another reincarnator. Afterwards, a large building appeared, with the narration identifying it as the counterintelligence headquarters. Ivan slowly walked toward the building with a clearly visible expression of annoyance. The guard stationed outside instantly raised his gun and pointed it at him, yelling for him to halt, warning that it was a restricted area and ignoring his warning would lead to consequences. But Ivan was expertly trained with reaction speeds far exceeding an ordinary person, and in the blink of an eye, he grabbed the soldier's gun and effortlessly disassembled it. He then twisted the man's arm and calmly stated, "Well trained." At that moment, several other guards rushed over and immediately aimed their guns at Ivan, prompting him to look around and remark, "Nice disguise." He then calmly told them to call Dmitri, leading a stammering officer to ask in absolute shock if he knew Lieutenant Colonel Dmitri, telling them not to make a fuss and to find a quiet place to talk. An increasingly irritated Ivan glared at them all and stated, "My name is Ivan Petrovich. Is anyone here formerly from the extermination squad?" An officer immediately replied that he was from the final batch, apologizing and asking if he could see his face. A moment later, Ivan released the man he was holding, though even then, all the surrounding soldiers kept their guns aimed straight at him, causing Ivan to look around and mutter, "Good grief, this is really happening." The officer stared intently at Ivan's face, recalling his appearance from the past. Little Ivan, he instantly showed utmost respect to his superior, stating it was an honor to meet Lieutenant Colonel Petrovich, introducing himself as Apsara formerly from the 3rd Assault Squad, and mentioning that he had only ever seen him once before from afar. Hearing that, Ivan simply repeated, "Do not mourn those who departed before us," stepping forward to add, "because I stand in the exact same ranks as them." The soldier looked at him with skepticism. "I heard you died in combat, Lieutenant Colonel. I'm certain I saw your nameplate at the National Cemetery. To which Ivan calmly replied that he never expected any survivors from the 3rd Assault Squad, instead of the era's elite. Hearing those words, the soldier answered, I survived, all of us survived. Following that exchange, Ivan resumed walking and gave his orders, telling them to bring Dmitri to him and simultaneously issue a notification to all new students. Looking thoroughly infuriated, Ivan continued, I want the complete roster of every university student, faculty member, and guest attending the opening ceremony. Important figures, their families, acquaintances, relatives, everyone currently able to access St. Jansk University. Tell them I need a list of everybody. Hearing the demand, the soldier immediately responded, Yes, Lieutenant Colonel. He then turned to his men and barked orders to notify Lieutenant Colonel Cherkov and inform them that an emergency situation had occurred. Ivan watched his men spring into action, while muttering to himself that the target was a reincarnator whose specialty was swordsmanship. Recalling their recent encounter, he deduced that the person was young, male, or female, and if male, at least before his voice broke, though the voice was too vague to pinpoint. Concluding that he needed to hear it a few more times to make a judgment, he carefully analyzed the mysterious person's movements, noting that given the agile motions and quick reflexes, the individual possessed bullet trajectory perception. Ivan continued thinking carefully, trying to figure out the reincarnator's identity by wondering if they were Korean, though brushing it off as unimportant compared to the fact that they were an earthling, questioning why they came here and how they arrived in this world, wondering if they were also the original author, or if this was just an accident, asking if they got hit by a truck. Pausing for a moment, he acknowledged that they could very well be the original author, as such things happened often, leading him to a deeply serious conclusion. There is one thing I can be certain of. He knew the original work was an academy genre story, which is the only reason a reincarnator would deliberately step into a university, because he knows the original plot. With that thought, Ivan began scanning the entire surrounding area. Growing so furious that the object in his hand began to crack and splinter under his grip, he muttered, So he knows the ending too. His expression turned grim as he muttered that he was getting curious now. First, I'll find the reincarnator and figure out if that damn original work wrote down my ending too. And after that, I'll only have one thing left to do. Meanwhile, elsewhere, someone suddenly called out, Novikov Karamjin, you useless piece of trash. Evgeny turned toward the voice and muttered, Father, as the man immediately scolded him, demanding how he could cause so much trouble just by going to the bathroom, calling him as useless as ever. Evgeny felt utterly miserable, thinking to himself that being thrown into an unfamiliar family as a useless youngest son and treated this way was already bad enough. But what on earth was up with that crazy guy from earlier? Was he a monster? Or no, he had never heard of anything like that. Suddenly, several new system windows popped up directly in front of Evgeny. One of them announced that a new quest had begun. Additional panels appeared one after another, revealing the quest details. Unranked quest, the gardener of St. Jansk University. You have caught his attention. May luck be with you, Arid. Defeat the gardener. Optional objective, survive. Penalty for failure, death. Evgeny's face turned pale, looking on the verge of tears and feeling completely terrified by what he just read, stammering, I'm going to die. The scene then shifted to a cafe in downtown Prizhenkaya, where a soldier was speaking to his superior. Superior, I told you meeting in a place like this is a bit inconvenient for us. The orphanage is better. We should have met at a place like that. You think I became a regular sponsor of your orphanage for no reason? Knowing your personality, you definitely came here because of an emergency. Right at that moment, Ivan walked into the room accompanied by a captain. As soon as they entered, everyone present immediately shifted their attention toward them, staring at the two men for a few seconds with cold, intimidating gazes that radiated explicit hostility, looking ready to fight at any moment. However, the captain merely smiled and calmly said, All right, everyone back to your business. Act natural. The moment he gave the order, everyone immediately returned to what they were doing, acting as if nothing unusual had happened, making it hard to believe these exact people were exuding such intense, murderous intent just seconds prior. Ivan and the captain then walked over to a table far away from the others and sat down, with the captain looking at Ivan to ask, So, what did you bring me? To which Ivan calmly replied, It's better if the superior sees it for himself. Without wasting any time, Ivan placed all the bombs right in front of him, the very explosives he had managed to disarm before they could detonate. The moment the captain saw them, his expression changed completely, turning furious and instantly releasing a powerful aura. Ivan quickly explained, I already removed the detonators from the bombs, prompting the captain to reply. You should have said that from the beginning. You almost scared me to death. Carefully inspecting the explosives, the captain began his analysis. Mana capacity is quite weak. These aren't designed to blow up a building or assassinate a VIP. They're probably just meant to create a distraction, right? Prompting a nearby person to instantly agree. That's right, there's definitely a separate infiltration team. Right then, a woman approached the table, and the captain handed all the bombs over to her with an important order. This definitely isn't the Crown Prince's faction. We haven't lost track of anyone on our end. Take these to the magic department at headquarters. The woman accepted the explosives and respectfully answered, "Yes, Lieutenant Colonel." Afterwards, the captain handed something to Ivan, saying, "Here is what you asked for. I had to sweat quite a bit to get it ready on such short notice." And Ivan took it with a simple thanks. The captain added, "One more thing, the lady wants to meet you once. Do you have free time?" To which Ivan instantly replied, "That's going to be difficult for me for a while." Without saying another word, Ivan stood up and walked out of the cafe. Not long after Ivan left, the woman returned to Lieutenant Colonel Petrovich, remarking, "Lieutenant Colonel Petrovich, little Ivan is truly something else. His reputation is completely unexaggerated. He's genuinely amazing," prompting the captain to smile and reply, "That's precisely why someone needs to date him. Just look at how gloomy he's become, coiling up in a house without sunlight and living all alone." He then issued another order. "All right, keep tabs on him. Don't let my superior wander around by himself." Returning to his room, Ivan immediately began reviewing all the documents he received, carefully examining the information while calculating the number of potential suspects. Noting there were about 3,000 new students enrolled this year. And since St. Jansk University had a 3-year program, it meant around 1,000 students per year. Adding graduate students and those on leave, including faculty, professors, teaching assistants, security, administrative staff, and admissions officers, brought the total to 1,733 people. Factoring in the families of new students attending the opening ceremony and foreign VIPs, pushed the total up to 2,429. Ivan's expression suddenly turned dead serious as he studied the data, muttering aloud, "I know you're here. I know because I'm a reincarnator myself." He continued thinking about the person he was hunting. You must be using knowledge from your past life to build a powerful network and introduce modern culture, copying the actions of the protagonist from the original story. Ivan's gaze grew colder. You're probably enjoying being reincarnated into this world, treating everyone around you like mere objects. You probably feel like you're strolling through a perfectly designed amusement park, especially after the war that all those NPCs fought desperately through has finally ended. You probably wanted to enroll in the academy and experience the whole fantasy reincarnation game for yourself. The lives of countless people treated as mere background characters in the story were probably things he couldn't care less about and would never understand. I didn't expect finding you to be easy, but it won't take too long either. The investigation dragged on all night, and by morning, Ivan had narrowed the suspects down to 3 individuals. The scene then shifted to 2 female students sitting together. Suddenly, Isabel recognized a familiar face and realized it was her friend Nazareth, whose face lit up with happiness upon spotting Isabel, hurrying over as Isabel warmly greeted her. "It's been way too long." At the same time, the girl sitting next to Isabel introduced herself to Nazareth. "Nice to meet you, I'm Yuri Frank, just call me Yuri." She then looked at Nazareth and politely asked, "Einar's daughter, should I call you that?" Prompting Nazareth to quickly clarify, That just means my dad's daughter. Among friends just call me Nazareth." Yuri looked surprised. "Just Nazareth, but you're a princess," causing tears to well up in Nazareth's eyes as she wiped them away and continued, "I'm genuinely moved because I've never been treated like this before," explaining that no one had ever been willing to sit down and share a meal with her until now, making this simple gesture of friendship mean more to her than anyone could imagine, which left a confused Yuri to ask, "Why didn't anybody want to approach you?" Isabel answered, "Because Nazareth's uncle is always escorting her everywhere." Nazareth suddenly began laughing almost hysterically as she complained about her situation. "My uncle ruined everything for me, especially my college life. Thanks, Sybil. If it weren't for you, I probably wouldn't even have a single friend." Isabel immediately corrected her. "You should thank Yuri, not me. She might not look it, but she's actually an exceptionally talented person. Yuri is our department's full scholarship student. She's great at swordsmanship, even better than me and even better than Oscar. Seriously, where on earth did someone like her come from?" Leaving Nazareth to look at Yuri in surprise and say, "Wow, she's even better than you, Isabel." Embarrassed by all the praise, Yuri modestly replied, You're flattering me too much, I just got lucky. While the three girls kept chatting, Ivan quietly observed them from afar, connecting the clues in his mind. Isabel Nazareth and a freshman named Yuri Frank, one of the new students everyone was talking about who enrolled on a full scholarship despite being an orphan. Much like most war orphans around here, she likely chose the name Yuri Frank herself, though something about her identity immediately caught Ivan's attention, because Yuri Frank was a fairly common first and last name in Krasilov. But within Krasilov's cultural sphere, Yuri was traditionally a male name, with the only countries where Yuri was commonly used as a female name being Korea and Japan. In other words, Yuri Frank could be a reincarnator, prompting him to eliminate all unnecessary possibilities from his investigation and prepare for the next phase. Elsewhere, a nearby girl called out to someone, "Let's walk together. What classes do you have this afternoon?" Yevgeny replied, "I'm heading to the biblical exegetical orientation," prompting the girl to ask about his other class, to which he answered, "I have the original gospel reading class." Realizing he had said something weird, Yevgeny quickly corrected himself. "Oh, sorry," as the girl just smiled and said, "It's fine, see you later, enjoy your classes." After she left, Yevgeny kept walking while thinking to himself, "If I knew I had to study this much, I never would have chosen the theology department." However, as he walked, he suddenly got a distinct feeling that someone was following him. The scene cut upward to reveal Ivan sitting high up in a tree, while Yevgeny looked around suspiciously, thinking, "I'm being stalked by a crazy Santa Claus throwing catapult rocks or something." Right at that moment, a tree branch right above Yevgeny was suddenly severed. He looked up and finally spotted Ivan, who simultaneously realized Yevgeny had noticed him, thinking, "That brat just locked eyes with me. I was stalking him from quite far away near the main theology building, yet he still managed to spot me." Ivan began inspecting Yevgeny more closely. "This kid also has a completely normal name, Yevgeny. Nothing particularly weird about it. But if I trace Yevgeny from its etymology, aside from the pronunciation, it's also a name commonly used in Korea." Ivan seriously considered his next step. Should I catch him and interrogate him? After careful thought, he ultimately decided against it. "No, if I want to handle this without causing trouble for myself, I need to prepare properly first. I can kill or catch him anytime, so I'll wait until I identify the final target." Right then, someone else appeared nearby carrying a large sniper rifle. "The counterintelligence command begged me to come, so I thought I'd drop by for a bit. But what on earth is that idiot doing?" Without warning, she fired a shot straight at Ivan. Ivan narrowly dodged the bullet and instantly glared at the direction the attack came from. The woman looked back at him and asked, "What are you doing here? Come back to my place with me, disciple, and while we're at it, I want to check out your orphanage too." The scene then cut to St. Vasilicia Orphanage as night fell. Inside the director's office, Enrique was surrounded by piles of documents. As she reviewed Ivan's investigation, her annoyance grew steadily. "Is this target speech analysis? You even deduced intonation by studying subtext and hyoid bone shifts. And here's a list of regions they could hail from based on their voice. Seriously, what kind of life have you lived?" Clearly overwhelmed by the massive workload Ivan had compiled, Enrique angrily grabbed a paper and demanded an explanation. "What is all of this?" She then hurled the paper at Ivan. "You wouldn't put this much effort into hunting down an international criminal with a red notice from the counterintelligence command. Yet you do all of this for a student? And you did it all by yourself, staying awake for days without sleep." Enrique then picked up a bottle of medicine and thought to herself that sometimes there were men like this. Men who once ruled the battlefield and ultimately became ticking time bombs ready to go off at any moment. Staring straight at Ivan, she said, "Ivan Petrovich, you're human, which means there are basic things you need to survive. Sleep, food, and rest. Exactly who are you trying to catch? The terrorist at St. Jansk University?" To which Ivan simply replied, "No, you wouldn't understand." Enrique grew even more frustrated. She grabbed Ivan by the collar and gave a firm demand. "Talk." Left with no choice, Ivan began explaining the situation indirectly. "Hypothetically, let's say there's someone like this. Someone who suddenly left behind the place they used to live and everyone they knew, only to materialize out of thin air in a completely unfamiliar world. No matter how hard they try, they can't wake up from the dream, and the surrounding world keeps feeling like something straight out of a novel. Maybe they're terrified of dying, maybe they want to go home, but either way, they did everything they could to survive. And fortunately, they had a bit of talent, so they adapted quickly and eventually built a life here. So why doesn't the story end? Then right in the middle of it all, someone else suddenly appears. A stranger presumably from the exact same homeland. And then you start asking yourself, Could that person be the actual protagonist? If that person reaches the ending, will I simply be discarded afterward? Perhaps my arrival in this world was nothing more than a tiny mistake made by a godlike entity controlling this entire universe. After listening to Ivan's explanation, Enrique grew profoundly confused. Studying him carefully while slowly connecting all the pieces, she asked, "So in short, you really are a reincarnator?" And Ivan answered honestly, "Hard to believe, but yes." Enrique continued, "And recently you confirmed there's another reincarnator, so now you've decided you have to kill him," with Ivan confirming it despite knowing how hard it sounded to believe. "That's right. I know you won't believe me." But then Enrique said something that completely caught Ivan off guard. "Ivan, listen to me carefully. You aren't the first. I've met another reincarnator besides you." Ivan was utterly stunned by her words. Up until that moment, he had firmly believed he was the only one who had experienced reincarnation, never imagining anyone had arrived before him. Enrique then revealed the name that changed everything. The name of that person was the hero, Max.